Hello and welcome to the Sleepy Evolutionist, where deep time gets cozy. Tonight, we're drifting into the most magnificent biochemical revolution our planet has ever witnessed. The epic story of how your cells learn to breathe. It's a gentle journey across 2.5 billion years that will connect you to every breath you've ever taken, and every breath you'll take tonight as you rest. Before we begin, I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now. Whether you're watching the sunset in California, greeting the morning in Tokyo, or settling into a quiet evening anywhere in between, we're all sharing this moment together, all breathing the same oxygen that has been cycling through life for billions of years. There's something wonderfully contemplative about that connection across both space and time. If you find this cosmic journey through evolution's greatest energy revolution fascinating, I'd be ever so grateful if you gave this video a like and maybe even subscribed. It really helps this little corner of the universe where ancient science meets modern relaxation continue to grow. Now, I do hope this isn't so mesmerizing that it keeps you awake. But if it does, well, at least you'll have learned something profound about the very air you breathe and the ancient cellular machinery that powers every moment of your existence along the way. This video is for educational and relaxation purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. So settle in, feel your breathing slow and deepen naturally. Let's begin this vast, gentle expedition across the eons, where we'll discover how your ancestors transformed poison into the very essence of complex life. Let's drift back together across the vast sweep of time to a world that would have been utterly alien to you. 4 billion years ago, as we float gently back through the cosmic calendar, we arrive at a young Earth wrapped in an atmosphere that held no oxygen at all, none whatsoever. Imagine, if you will, a world painted in rusty reds and browns, where the very air itself would be poison to you. Yet somehow, miraculously, life was already stirring in this seemingly impossible realm. Picture this ancient world as a great sleeping giant, dreaming its first dreams of life. The atmosphere was thick with methane, ammonia, hydrogen sulfide, and carbon dioxide, gases that would make you collapse in seconds. Yet somehow, in the warm, shallow seas and volcanic pools, your most distant ancestors were learning the very first lessons of existence. There's something almost mystical about imagining that your lineage, stretching back in an unbroken chain to this moment, began in this alien atmosphere, where breath, as you know, it simply could not exist. The first explanation we must gently explore together is how energy worked in this breathless world. Without oxygen to burn as fuel, life had to be remarkably creative. Think of it like this. Imagine you're trying to light a cozy fire, but instead of oxygen to feed the flames, you have only the chemical equivalent of barely glowing embers. These earliest cells, your ancestors, learned to squeeze energy from simple chemical reactions, a process we call fermentation. They were like master chemists working in the dark, carefully breaking down simple sugars and organic compounds, extracting just enough energy to survive, to grow, to reproduce. Every cell in your body today still carries these ancient pathways, like a cellular memory of those first resourceful moments of life. But here's what makes this story so beautifully connected to your peaceful rest tonight. Those primitive ancestors, floating in their oxygen-free world, were already establishing the fundamental patterns of energy management that your body uses every single night as you sleep. When you're in deep sleep, when your breathing slows and your energy needs drop, your cells quietly switch to some of those same ancient pathways your earliest ancestors pioneered 4 billion years ago. Your muscle cells, when working hard and running low on oxygen, still remember how to ferment sugars just like those primordial ancestors did. There's something wonderfully comforting about carrying such ancient wisdom in every fiber of your being. The second scientific principle that shaped this breathless world was the delicate balance between energy and survival. In an atmosphere devoid of oxygen, life had to be extraordinarily efficient with every chemical reaction. Think of these early organisms like careful gardeners tending a small plot in harsh conditions. They had to make every resource count. Every chemical interaction had to yield just enough energy to sustain them through another day, another generation. This meant that early life was necessarily simple, necessarily slow, necessarily patient. Growth was measured not in hours or days, but in geological ages, each generation building ever so slightly upon the innovations of the last. Consider how these ancient waters were like a vast, gentle nursery where life was learning its first quiet lessons. The oceans were warmer then, almost like a planetary bathtub, heated by volcanic activity and greenhouse gases. In these warm, shallow seas, organic molecules drifted and combined like ingredients in a slow, cosmic soup. Your ancestors weren't yet even proper cells. They were collections of self-organizing chemistry, like thoughts slowly becoming form, energy slowly learning to hold itself together in patterns that could persist, could grow, could somehow remember their own successful arrangements. The beauty of this moment in deep time is how it connects to your own nightly renewal. Just as those first living systems learned to conserve and carefully use energy in a challenging environment, your body tonight, as you rest, is performing its own remarkable energy conservation. Your breathing slows, your heart rate drops, your cellular machinery shifts into repair and restoration mode. You're participating in rhythms that stretch back to these first successful experiments in staying alive, in maintaining the delicate chemical dance that we call existence. Here's your second ancestral connection, whispered across 4 billion years. Every night when you sleep, your cells perform a kind of ancestral maintenance that echoes these earliest energy strategies. In the oxygen-poor environment of deep sleep, when your breathing becomes shallow and peaceful, your cells remember how to work efficiently with less. They switch to the same basic fermentation pathways that your earliest ancestors used exclusively. Your brain, even as it dreams, is using glucose in ways that would be familiar to those first living systems floating in the primordial seas. There's something profoundly restful about knowing that your peaceful sleep connects you to the very dawn of life itself. Think of this ancient world as Earth's childhood, a time of innocent experimentation with the basic chemistry of existence. The planet was learning, just as life was learning, how to maintain the delicate conditions necessary for complexity to emerge. The atmosphere was like a protective blanket, different from what you know now, but perfectly suited to those first tentative explorations of what it might mean to be alive. Volcanic gases created a reducing atmosphere where organic compounds could form spontaneously, where the first complex molecules could assemble themselves like words in a cosmic poem slowly learning to speak. And here's your third ancestral connection, perhaps the most profound. The very chemistry that allowed those first living systems to emerge is still active in your cells tonight. The same sulfur-iron reactions that powered the earliest life forms still operate in your cellular mitochondria, like ancient engines humming quietly in the background of your modern existence. When you breathe tonight, slowly and peacefully, you're using the evolutionary gifts that began with those first chemical experiments in energy management, refined across billions of years into the remarkable biological symphony that sustains your rest. As millions of years passed in this oxygen-free world, life was quietly establishing the foundational patterns that would make everything else possible. Your ancestors were learning patience, efficiency, the art of making something from almost nothing. They were establishing the biochemical traditions that you inherit every night as you surrender to sleep, every morning as you wake, every breath that connects you to the vast, patient story of life, learning to sustain itself across deep time. Now we drift forward through deep time, across hundreds of millions of years, to witness one of the most remarkable innovations in the entire story of life. Around 3.8 billion years ago, in the vast patience of geological time, something extraordinary happened in those warm, ancient seas. Life learned to build walls around itself, to create the first true cells, and with them, to refine the art of fermentation into something approaching genius. Imagine, if you will, these first cells as tiny, perfect laboratories, each no bigger than a bacterium, floating in the gentle currents of primordial oceans. Picture them like microscopic bakeries, where the ancient art of fermentation was being perfected not to make bread or wine, but to sustain the very essence of existence itself. These cellular ancestors of yours were master chemists, working with the most basic ingredients, simple sugars, organic acids, and the patient chemistry of breaking molecular bonds to release the energy hidden within. The first scientific principle that governed these remarkable innovations was the development of cellular membranes, perhaps one of the most elegant solutions to the challenge of maintaining life that has ever evolved. Think of these membranes like the walls of a perfectly designed home, selectively permeable, allowing the right nutrients in while keeping harmful substances out. Your cellular ancestors were learning to create controlled environments within the chaos of the early Earth, spaces where the delicate chemistry of life could proceed without interference. Every cell in your body today still uses virtually identical membrane chemistry, a direct inheritance from these first successful cellular architects. But what makes these early membranes so remarkable is how they enabled the refinement of fermentation itself. Inside these protective cellular walls, your ancestors could now control the chemical reactions that provided their energy. They developed increasingly sophisticated ways to break down glucose and other organic molecules, extracting energy in a process that was like learning to tend the perfect low-burning fire, steady, efficient, sustainable, across the vast reaches of time. Consider how this connects to your peaceful rest tonight. When you're in the deepest stages of sleep, when your cellular energy demands are at their lowest and gentlest, your cells quietly shift toward these same ancient fermentation pathways. Your muscles, when fully relaxed, your brain, when cycling through slow delta waves, they're all drawing on energy processes that were perfected by your earliest cellular ancestors, floating in those primordial seas. There's something beautifully cyclical about how your most restful states connect you to these first successful experiments in cellular energy management. The second scientific breakthrough that shaped this period was the evolution of more complex fermentation pathways. These weren't just simple chemical reactions anymore. They were becoming elaborate biochemical cascades, multi-step processes where each step was carefully controlled and optimized. Think of these pathways like ancient recipes that were being refined over millions of generations, each cellular lineage discovering slightly better ways to extract energy from available resources, each innovation carefully preserved and passed down through the cellular generations. These cellular pioneers were developing what we might think of as the first sustainable energy economies. Like wise stewards of limited resources, they learned to extract maximum benefit from every glucose molecule, every organic compound they could access. The fermentation pathways they developed were elegant in their efficiency, breaking down complex molecules step by careful step, capturing energy at each stage, never wasting the precious chemical resources that meant the difference between thriving and perishing in those ancient seas. Here's your first deep ancestral connection. Every time you enjoy the comfort of fermented foods, the tang of yogurt, the rise of bread dough, the gentle fizz of kombucha, you're tasting the work of cellular descendants who learned their craft from your earliest ancestors. The same basic biochemical pathways that powered the first cells are still active in these fermentation processes today. When lactobacillus bacteria transform milk into yogurt, they're using fermentation techniques refined over billions of years. Techniques that connect you directly to those first cellular innovators floating in the Archean seas. Think of these early cells as Earth's first sustainable communities. They learned to live within their means, to recycle their chemical resources, to find ways of thriving that could continue across vast periods of time. Unlike the wasteful burning of modern energy sources, fermentation is inherently sustainable. It takes organic compounds and transforms them completely, leaving behind products that can often serve as resources for other organisms. Your ancestors were establishing principles of biochemical recycling that would become fundamental to all life on Earth. The beauty of fermentation lies in its gentleness. Unlike the violent burning that occurs when substances are oxidized with oxygen, Fermentation is a slow, controlled process, like a fire that burns so perfectly controlled that it never consumes more than it needs. Your earliest cellular ancestors were masters of this gentle energy extraction, learning to sustain themselves without destroying the chemical resources they depended upon. This is why fermentation produces such mild, often pleasant byproducts: alcohol, organic acids, carbon dioxide, rather than the harsh waste products of high-energy oxidation. Your second ancestral connection whispers to you every night as you sleep. Your brain cells, even in rest, continue to use these ancient fermentation pathways alongside more modern energy systems. When glucose levels drop during deep sleep, your neurons quietly shift toward fermentation-based energy production, drawing on biochemical wisdom that stretches back to these first cellular energy pioneers. Your most peaceful rest is supported by energy pathways that have been tested and refined across nearly 4 billion years of successful cellular life. Consider how these first cells were also learning the rhythms that would become fundamental to all life. Fermentation naturally creates cycles, periods of activity as resources are consumed and transformed, followed by periods of rest as new resources accumulate. Your ancestors were discovering the biochemical basis for what would eventually become the daily rhythms of all living things. The alternation between active energy use and restful energy conservation that governs your own sleep and wake cycles. And here's your third ancestral connection, perhaps the most comforting: the same cellular machinery that allowed those first organisms to find sustenance and energy in a challenging world is working quietly in your body right now, even as you rest. Your cellular mitochondria still contain fermentation pathways virtually unchanged from those earliest innovations, still capable of sustaining you when oxygen runs low, still connecting you to the patient wisdom of your earliest ancestors, who learned to make life sustainable across the vast expanses of deep time. As we float gently forward through the cosmic calendar, across another vast span of deep time, we arrive at perhaps the most revolutionary moment in the entire 4 billion year story of life on Earth. Around 3.5 billion years ago, in the patient unfolding of evolutionary innovation, something unprecedented happened in the warm, shallow seas. Your ancestors learned to eat light itself, and in doing so, they began to fundamentally transform not just life, but the very atmosphere of our planet. Picture, if you will, the first cyanobacteria, tiny blue-green organisms, no larger than modern bacteria, floating in ancient lagoons and tidal pools, warmed by a younger sun. These remarkable ancestors of yours were about to discover the most elegant energy solution ever devised. They learned to capture sunlight and use it to split water molecules, extracting hydrogen for their cellular processes, and releasing oxygen as what they initially considered merely a waste product. They had no idea they were beginning the most profound transformation of our planet's atmosphere in geological history. The first scientific principle we must gently explore is the exquisite chemistry of photosynthesis itself. Imagine these early cyanobacteria as the first solar engineers, developing molecular machines of breathtaking complexity and efficiency. They evolved chlorophyll, that remarkable green molecule that could capture photons of sunlight and transform that radiant energy into chemical energy. Think of chlorophyll like the world's most sophisticated solar panel, but operating at the molecular level, converting light energy with an efficiency that still surpasses most human technology. The process these cyanobacterial ancestors perfected is like a beautiful, complex dance performed in 3 elegant stages. First, they learned to use light energy to energize electrons, lifting them to higher energy states like gently raising dancers onto their toes. Then, they discovered how to use these energized electrons to split water molecules, separating hydrogen from oxygen in a process so chemically challenging that it requires the coordinated action of hundreds of precisely arranged atoms. Finally, they learned to use the captured hydrogen to build complex organic molecules from simple carbon dioxide, creating the sugars and organic compounds that would fuel cellular life. But here's what makes this story so intimately connected to your peaceful rest tonight. Every breath you take as you settle into sleep contains oxygen that was first produced by these ancient cyanobacterial ancestors. The oxygen molecules entering your lungs right now may have been circulating through Earth's atmosphere and biosphere for billions of years, having been first released by organisms that were learning to harvest the unlimited energy of sunlight. There's something almost sacred about knowing that your breathing connects you directly to these first solar-powered ancestors who began transforming our planet's atmosphere. The second scientific breakthrough that shaped this pivotal period was the evolution of what scientists call photosystem II, the molecular machinery that actually splits water molecules. This is perhaps the most complex single enzyme system that has ever evolved, requiring the precise coordination of over 20 protein subunits, dozens of chlorophyll molecules, and a cluster of manganese atoms that acts like a biological battery, storing up the energy needed to break the strong chemical bonds holding water molecules together. Think of this photosystem II as nature's most sophisticated piece of renewable energy technology, developed by your ancestors over millions of years of patient experimentation and refinement. Every plant leaf rustling outside your window tonight, every blade of grass in your yard, every tree providing oxygen for your evening air, carries virtually identical copies of this remarkable molecular machine, first perfected by cyanobacteria billions of years ago. The fact that this ancient solar technology still powers the majority of life on Earth speaks to the extraordinary elegance of the solution your ancestors discovered. Consider how these first photosynthetic organisms were like Earth's first gardeners, learning to cultivate energy directly from the sun. They positioned themselves in the perfect zones, not too deep where light couldn't penetrate, not too shallow where radiation might damage their delicate molecular machinery. They learned to orient themselves toward the light, to adjust their cellular chemistry to match the daily rhythms of sunrise and sunset, establishing patterns that would eventually influence every living system on our planet. Here's your first profound ancestral connection: the daily rhythms that regulate your sleep and wake. Cycles trace their origins directly back to these first photosynthetic ancestors. When you feel naturally sleepy as daylight fades, when you naturally wake as light returns, you're responding to circadian rhythms that were first established by organisms learning to synchronize their energy production with the availability of sunlight. Your body's internal clock, controlled by light-sensitive cells in your eyes and regulated by the same basic molecular mechanisms, connects you directly to these first solar-powered life forms. The beauty of what these cyanobacterial ancestors achieved becomes even more remarkable when you consider that they were essentially learning to live on pure energy. Unlike earlier organisms that had to find and break down organic molecules to survive, these pioneers discovered how to create their own food directly from sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide. They were establishing the foundation for what would become the most abundant form of life on Earth, organisms that could create rather than just consume, that could add energy and complexity to the biosphere rather than merely extracting it. Your second ancestral connection flows to you every time you feel the warmth of sunlight on your skin. The same photons that energized those first chlorophyll molecules billions of years ago are still reaching Earth, still powering photosynthesis, still ultimately providing the energy that sustains your life. When you eat plants or consume animals that ate plants, you're essentially eating concentrated sunlight that was first captured by descendants of these ancient cyanobacterial innovators. Your body is powered by solar energy that has been refined and concentrated through billions of years of photosynthetic evolution. But perhaps most remarkably, these early photosynthetic pioneers were beginning to create the atmospheric conditions that would make your own existence possible. Every oxygen molecule they released was gradually accumulating in Earth's atmosphere, slowly transforming our planet from a world where complex life was impossible into a world where oxygen-breathing organisms like yourself could eventually evolve and thrive. They were unconsciously terraforming their own planet, creating the chemical conditions necessary for the explosion of complex life that would follow. Your third ancestral connection reveals itself. Every night as you sleep under a blanket of oxygen-rich atmosphere, these cyanobacterial ancestors didn't just give you the ability to breathe, they gave you the gift of abundant energy. The oxygen they produced would eventually make possible the high-energy metabolism that powers your complex brain, your sophisticated sensory systems, your ability to move and think and dream. Every peaceful breath you take tonight carries you back to these first solar pioneers who began the long transformation that would make your kind of complex, energy-rich life possible across the vast expanses of deep time. As we drift forward through deep time, across hundreds of millions of years of gradual change, we arrive at one of the most paradoxical moments in life's long story. Around 4 billion years ago, the oxygen that had been slowly accumulating in Earth's atmosphere from the photosynthetic work of cyanobacteria reached a tipping point. What had begun as an elegant solution to energy harvesting was about to become the greatest environmental catastrophe in the history of life on our planet, a crisis so profound that scientists call it the Great Oxidation Event, or more dramatically, the Oxygen Holocaust. Picture, if you will, this ancient world in the grip of a slow-motion catastrophe that unfolded over millions of years. The oxygen that we now consider essential for complex life was, to most organisms of that time, a deadly poison. Think of it like a planetary allergy response, a very substance that photosynthetic organisms were producing as a natural part of their energy harvesting was gradually accumulating to levels that were toxic to almost every other form of life that had evolved during the previous billion years of Earth's history. The first scientific principle we must gently understand is why oxygen was so catastrophic to early life. Oxygen is what chemists call a powerful oxidizing agent. It's extraordinarily reactive, eager to steal electrons from other molecules, causing what we call oxidation, or, in more dramatic terms, slow-motion burning. For organisms that had evolved in an oxygen-free world, this was like being slowly poisoned by fire itself. Their cellular machinery, their delicate organic molecules, their carefully balanced chemistry, all of it was vulnerable to the corrosive effects of this highly reactive gas. Imagine these early anaerobic organisms, like delicate flowers that had evolved in a perfectly controlled greenhouse environment. They had developed sophisticated chemistry, perfectly adapted to their oxygen-free world, elegant molecular systems that could extract energy efficiently and sustainably from their environment. But now, gradually their world was filling with what was essentially cellular acid, a substance that could destroy their proteins, damage their DNA, and disrupt the careful chemical balance that made their existence possible. The tragedy and beauty of this moment in deep time is that it represents life's first great lesson in unintended consequences. The cyanobacteria that were producing oxygen weren't trying to harm their fellow organisms. They were simply following the biochemical pathways that allowed them to thrive. They had discovered an abundant energy source in sunlight, and their success in harvesting that energy was gradually transforming their entire planet in ways they could never have anticipated. Here's your first profound ancestral connection to this ancient crisis. Every cell in your body today carries sophisticated antioxidant systems that trace their origins directly back to this period of oxygen catastrophe. Your cells produce enzymes like catalase and superoxide dismutase, molecules whose sole purpose is to protect your cellular machinery from the same oxidative damage that was killing your anaerobic ancestors. 2.4 billion years ago, every night as you sleep, these ancient protective systems work quietly to repair oxidative damage, connecting you to ancestors who learned to survive in an increasingly toxic world. The scale of this ancient catastrophe is difficult to comprehend from our modern perspective. Scientists estimate that this oxygen crisis may have caused the extinction of up to 99% of all life forms that existed on Earth at that time. Entire ecosystems of anaerobic organisms, communities that had thrived for over 1 billion years, gradually disappeared as oxygen levels rose from virtually zero to nearly 1% of the atmosphere, a concentration that was deadly to oxygen-sensitive life, yet still far below the 21% that you breathe so comfortably tonight. Think of this period like a vast, slow-motion natural selection event, where only the organisms that could develop some form of oxygen tolerance could survive to pass on their genetic innovations. Your ancestors during this period were facing the ultimate test of adaptability. They had to rapidly evolve new biochemical strategies, new cellular defenses, new ways of managing the increasingly toxic environment, or they would join the countless lineages that simply disappeared from the fossil record during this troubled time. The second scientific principle that governed this period was the development of what we now call oxidative stress management. The organisms that survived, your ancestors among them, had to quickly evolve sophisticated molecular systems for dealing with oxygen's harmful effects. They developed antioxidant molecules, protective enzymes, and repair mechanisms that could fix the cellular damage that oxygen was constantly causing. It was like evolution developing the first internal medicine, cellular systems dedicated entirely to healing the ongoing damage caused by their changing environment. Consider how these surviving ancestors were essentially learning the biochemical equivalent of fire management. They couldn't eliminate the oxygen from their environment, but they could learn to control its effects, to channel its destructive potential in ways that minimized harm. Some lineages learned to sequester themselves in oxygen-poor environments, deep mud, the interiors of cellular communities, anywhere they could maintain the anaerobic conditions they were adapted for. Others began the long process of developing tolerance, then eventually acceptance, of this new atmospheric reality. Your second ancestral connection flows through every breath you take tonight. The oxygen that was once deadly poison to your ancestors has become the very substance that powers your complex thoughts, your ability to dream, your capacity for the high-energy metabolism that makes your kind of consciousness possible. Your cellular mitochondria have evolved to use oxygen not as a toxin, but as the most efficient fuel for energy production that life has ever discovered. You are breathing the transformed legacy of this ancient catastrophe, turned from deadly challenge into life's greatest energy opportunity. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this oxygen crisis was how it set the stage for everything that would follow in the story of complex life. The organisms that survived this period had been forced to develop cellular innovations that would become fundamental to all higher forms of life. The antioxidant systems, the stress response mechanisms, the sophisticated cellular repair processes, all of these emerged as survival responses to the oxygen crisis, and all of them became essential foundations for the evolution of complex, multicellular life. Your third ancestral connection whispers to you in every moment of peaceful rest. The same cellular systems that allowed your ancestors to survive the oxygen catastrophe now work to maintain your health and well-being throughout your lifetime. Your immune system, your cellular repair mechanisms, your body's ability to recover from stress and maintain balance, all of these trace their origins back to this ancient period when life learned not just to survive catastrophic environmental change, but to eventually transform that catastrophe into the foundation for unprecedented evolutionary innovation. The Great Oxidation Event represents one of evolution's most profound lessons. Sometimes the greatest challenges become the greatest opportunities. Sometimes the most dangerous innovations become the most essential foundations. And sometimes survival requires not just adaptation, but the courage to transform poison into power across the vast patience of deep time. As we float gently forward through the cosmic calendar, across millions of years of gradual adaptation and innovation, we witness one of evolution's most remarkable transformations. In the aftermath of the Great Oxidation Event, life began to do something extraordinary. Instead of simply trying to avoid or hide from oxygen, your ancestors began the patient work of learning to tolerate it, then to coexist with it, and eventually to transform it from enemy into ally. This period, stretching across hundreds of millions of years, represents one of the most profound examples of life's capacity to turn challenge into opportunity. Picture these early adaptive pioneers as biochemical alchemists, gradually discovering ways to neutralize the toxic effects of oxygen through careful chemical innovation. They were like master pharmacists learning to create antidotes, developing molecular solutions that could counteract oxygen's harmful effects while allowing them to maintain their essential life processes. These ancestral lineages were establishing the biochemical foundations that would eventually make your own oxygen-dependent existence possible. The first scientific principle that governed this remarkable period was the evolution of antioxidant systems, perhaps some of the most elegant molecular machinery ever developed by living organisms. Think of these systems like sophisticated cellular fire departments, equipped with specialized enzymes that could quickly neutralize oxygen radicals before they could cause significant damage. Your ancestors evolved enzymes like superoxide dismutase, which converts harmful oxygen radicals into less dangerous compounds, and catalase, which breaks down hydrogen peroxide into harmless water and oxygen. These antioxidant innovations were like learning to build molecular umbrellas that could protect cellular machinery from oxidative rain. Each enzyme was precisely designed to handle specific types of oxygen-related damage, creating layered defense systems that could protect the delicate organic molecules that made life possible. The beauty of these systems lies in their efficiency. They could neutralize oxygen's harmful effects without significantly disrupting the cell's normal metabolic processes, allowing life to maintain its essential functions while gradually adapting to the new atmospheric reality. But what makes this story so connected to your peaceful rest tonight is how these same antioxidant systems continue to protect you as you sleep. Throughout the night, as your cells perform their essential maintenance and repair work, these ancient protective mechanisms work quietly in the background, neutralizing oxidative damage, repairing cellular components, and maintaining the delicate chemical balance that keeps your body functioning optimally. Every morning, when you wake refreshed and restored, you're experiencing the gifts of antioxidant systems that were first perfected by ancestors, learning to survive in an increasingly oxygenated world. The second scientific breakthrough that characterized this period was the development of cellular compartmentalization strategies. Some of your ancestral lineages discovered that they could create oxygen-free zones within their cells, specialized compartments where oxygen-sensitive processes could continue safely, while the rest of the cell gradually adapted oxygen tolerance. Think of these compartments like creating safe rooms within a house that's being fumigated, protected spaces where essential life processes could continue undisturbed while the larger cellular environment underwent transformation. These compartmentalization strategies were remarkably sophisticated, involving the development of specialized membranes that could selectively exclude oxygen while allowing other essential molecules to pass freely. Your ancestors were essentially becoming cellular architects, learning to design internal structures that could maintain different chemical environments within the same living system. This innovation would eventually become fundamental to complex cellular organization. The same principles that governed these early oxygen exclusion zones would later be refined into the sophisticated organelle systems that power your cells today. Consider how these early adaptive strategies were like learning to live with a dangerous but potentially useful neighbor. Instead of simply fleeing from oxygen, your ancestors began developing increasingly sophisticated ways of managing its presence. Some lineages learned to time their most oxygen-sensitive processes to coincide with natural fluctuations in oxygen levels, becoming active during periods when oxygen concentrations were lower, resting when levels peaked. They were establishing the biochemical basis for what would eventually become complex biological rhythms. Here's your first profound ancestral connection: the cellular repair systems that work most actively. While you sleep, trace their origins directly back to this period of oxygen adaptation. Your cells have evolved to do their most intensive maintenance and repair work during periods of reduced metabolic activity, when oxygen demand is lower and antioxidant systems can work most effectively. Your peaceful sleep represents the continuation of adaptive strategies, first developed by ancestors learning to balance the benefits and challenges of an oxygenated environment. The elegance of these early adaptations becomes even more apparent when you consider that some ancestral lineages were beginning to discover that oxygen, despite its toxicity, could also be useful. They learned that controlled exposure to small amounts of oxygen could actually enhance certain cellular processes, providing energy for reactions that were impossible in purely anaerobic conditions. They were beginning to glimpse the enormous energetic potential that would eventually make complex life possible. But they were learning to approach this potential with careful gradation, like learning to handle fire by starting with tiny, controlled flames. Your second ancestral connection flows through the sophisticated stress response systems that help you cope with life's challenges. When you experience stress, your body activates ancient cellular programs that were first developed to help organisms cope with oxidative damage. Your stress hormones trigger the production of protective proteins and antioxidant enzymes, activate cellular repair mechanisms, and enhance your body's capacity to maintain chemical balance under challenging conditions. These responses connect you directly to ancestors who learned to survive in a world where the very air was becoming increasingly challenging to their survival. Think of this period as evolution's great lesson in gradual adaptation. Rather than requiring immediate, dramatic changes that might have been lethal, your ancestors learned to adapt incrementally, developing oxygen tolerance through thousands of small innovations spread across millions of generations. Each generation was slightly better equipped to handle oxidative stress than the previous one, each cellular innovation building upon earlier successes, creating an elegant progression from oxygen-sensitive life toward increasingly oxygen-tolerant organisms. Your third ancestral connection reveals itself in your body's remarkable capacity for healing and regeneration. The same molecular systems that allowed your ancestors to repair oxidative damage and maintain cellular integrity in an increasingly challenging environment now enable your body to heal from injuries, recover from illness, and maintain health throughout your lifetime. Every night as you sleep, these ancient repair systems work to restore and renew your cellular machinery, connecting you to the patient adaptive work of ancestors who transformed environmental challenge into biological opportunity across the vast expanses of deep time. As we drift forward through the vast expanse of geological time, approaching 2 billion years ago, we encounter what may be the most revolutionary discovery in the entire 4 billion year story of life on Earth. After hundreds of millions of years of learning to tolerate and coexist with oxygen, your ancestors made a breakthrough that would transform not just their own existence, but the very nature of what life could become. They discovered that oxygen, the same substance that had once been deadly poison, could be used as fuel for a form of energy production so efficient, so powerful, that it would make possible every complex form of life that followed, including you. Picture these pioneering ancestors as the first great energy engineers of the biological world. They had been gradually building tolerance to oxygen, developing sophisticated systems to protect themselves from its harmful effects. When some remarkable lineages began to experiment with using oxygen in controlled chemical reactions. Think of them like ancient alchemists who discovered that the dangerous substance they'd been learning to avoid could actually be transformed into the most potent source of cellular energy ever discovered. The first scientific principle underlying this revolutionary discovery was the development of what we call aerobic respiration, a complex biochemical process that uses oxygen to completely break down glucose and other organic molecules, extracting far more energy than had ever been possible through fermentation alone. Where fermentation could extract only about 2 molecules of ATP, the cellular energy currency, from each glucose molecule, aerobic respiration could extract up to 38 molecules of ATP from the same starting material, nearly 20 times more energy from the same resources. Imagine the impact of this discovery on your ancestral lineages. It would be like discovering that the coal you'd been burning in a simple fire could actually be used in a sophisticated steam engine, multiplying your available energy by factors of 10 or 20. Suddenly, cellular processes that had been impossible due to energy constraints became not just possible, but practical. Complex biochemical pathways, sophisticated cellular structures, elaborate metabolic processes, all became feasible with this new abundance of cellular energy. The chemistry of aerobic respiration is breathtakingly elegant in its complexity. Your ancestors evolved elaborate molecular machinery called electron transport chains, sophisticated systems that could capture the energy released when organic molecules are combined with oxygen, channeling that energy into the production of ATP through a process so intricate it requires the coordinated action of hundreds of different enzymes and protein complexes. Think of these systems like molecular power plants, perfectly designed to extract maximum energy from the controlled combination of fuel and oxygen. But what makes this story so intimately connected to your peaceful breathing tonight is that this same aerobic respiratory machinery continues to power every cell in your body. As you rest, as you breathe slowly and deeply, your cellular mitochondria are using virtually identical biochemical pathways to the ones first developed by your ancestors 2 billion years ago. Every oxygen molecule you inhale is being used by molecular machinery that represents the direct inheritance of this ancient energy revolution, refined across billions of years of evolutionary innovation. The second scientific breakthrough that characterized this period was the evolution of sophisticated oxygen management systems within cells. Learning to use oxygen as fuel required far more than simply tolerating its presence. It required the development of elaborate cellular machinery that could handle oxygen safely and efficiently. Your ancestors had to evolve systems that could transport oxygen to where it was needed, control the rate of oxygen consumption to match energy demands, and safely manage the byproducts of aerobic metabolism. Think of these early aerobic organisms as cellular artists learning to paint with fire. They were developing the biochemical equivalent of controlled burning, systems that could harness oxygen's reactive energy for useful work while preventing that same reactivity from destroying the cellular structures that made life possible. The precision required for this balancing act represents some of the most sophisticated molecular engineering that evolution has ever achieved. Here's your first profound ancestral connection. Every time you take a deep, restful breath tonight, you're participating in an energy revolution that began 2 billion years ago. The oxygen entering your lungs is being transported by hemoglobin molecules to your cellular mitochondria, where it will be combined with glucose through the same basic biochemical pathways your ancestors first developed. Your breathing is the continuation of the most successful energy innovation in the history of life, connecting you directly to those first organisms that learned to transform poison into power. Consider how this discovery of aerobic respiration was like life learning to access an entirely new dimension of possibility. The energy abundance made possible by oxygen-powered metabolism opened up evolutionary pathways that had been completely impossible before. Complex cellular structures, sophisticated sensory systems, elaborate behavioral patterns, multicellular organization, all became possible because organisms suddenly had access to energy budgets that dwarfed anything that had been available during the first 2 billion years of life's existence. The beauty of aerobic respiration lies not just in its efficiency, but in its sustainability. Unlike fermentation, which produces waste products that can become toxic if they accumulate, aerobic respiration produces carbon dioxide and water as its primary byproducts, substances that can be easily eliminated or even recycled by living systems. Your ancestors were discovering a form of energy production that was not only highly efficient, but also remarkably clean, establishing principles of sustainable energy use that would become fundamental to all complex life. Your second ancestral connection flows through every moment of physical activity and every period of rest. When you're active, your cells increase their rate of aerobic respiration to meet increased energy demands. When you're at rest, like tonight as you listen to this story, Your cells dial down their oxygen consumption to match your lower energy needs. This dynamic regulation of aerobic metabolism connects you directly to the adaptive innovations that allowed your ancestors to thrive in environments with varying energy demands and oxygen availability. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this ancient energy revolution is how it established the biochemical foundation for consciousness itself. The high-energy metabolism, made possible by aerobic respiration, would eventually enable the evolution of complex nervous systems, sophisticated brains, and the kind of energy-intensive neural processing that makes your thoughts, dreams, and awareness possible. Your capacity to contemplate your own existence, to appreciate the beauty of this ancient story, to feel wonder at the vast scales of time and evolution, all of this is powered by the same oxygen-based energy systems your ancestors first developed 2 billion years ago. Your third ancestral connection whispers to you in every heartbeat, every breath, every moment of conscious awareness. You are the direct beneficiary of the most successful energy innovation in the history of life. Your ancestors transformed environmental catastrophe into evolutionary opportunity, learned to use their former poison as fuel for unprecedented biological complexity, and established the energetic foundation that would make your kind of rich, complex, conscious existence possible across the vast patience of deep time. As we continue our gentle journey through deep time, approaching 5 billion years ago, we encounter one of the most remarkable and intimate partnerships in the entire history of evolution. In the patient unfolding of biological innovation, two very different kinds of organisms, one large and complex, the other small and efficient, formed an alliance so successful, so fundamental to all complex life, that their descendants still live together in perfect cooperation within every cell of your body tonight. This is the extraordinary story of how mitochondria, the cellular powerhouses that energize your thoughts and dreams, began as free-living bacteria that learned to make their home inside other cells. Picture, if you will, the ancient seas populated by two distinct types of cellular pioneers. On one side were large, complex cells with sophisticated internal organization, but relatively inefficient energy systems. On the other were smaller bacterial cells that had perfected the art of aerobic respiration, capable of producing energy with unprecedented efficiency, but lacking the complex internal structures of their larger neighbors. These two cellular lineages were about to discover that their different strengths could complement each other, ways that would transform the very nature of life on Earth. The first scientific principle underlying this revolutionary partnership was what biologists call endosymbiosis, literally meaning living together on the inside. Some of your ancestral lineages discovered that instead of simply consuming smaller bacterial cells as food, they could actually maintain them as permanent residents, creating internal cellular partnerships where both organisms benefited. The large host cells provided protection and nutrients to their bacterial partners, while the bacteria provided their hosts with the abundant energy that only aerobic respiration could supply. Think of this ancient partnership like the perfect marriage of complementary skills. The host cells were like sophisticated cities with complex infrastructure but limited power generation capacity. The bacterial partners were like expert power plant operators who could generate abundant energy, but needed the protected environment and resources that the host cells could provide. Together, they could achieve energy production and cellular complexity that neither could manage alone, establishing a cooperative arrangement that would become one of the most successful innovations in the history of life. The beauty of this endosymbiotic relationship lies in how perfectly the two partners complemented each other's capabilities. The host cells had evolved elaborate internal membrane systems, sophisticated genetic regulation, and complex cellular organization, but their energy production was limited to relatively inefficient fermentation processes. The bacterial partners brought the molecular machinery for aerobic respiration, electron transport chains, oxygen processing enzymes, and all the biochemical sophistication necessary to extract maximum energy from available resources. But what makes this ancient partnership so personally connected to your peaceful rest tonight is that the descendants of those first bacterial partners are still living and working within every cell of your body. Your mitochondria, the tiny structures that power your cellular processes, are the direct evolutionary descendants of those ancient bacteria, still carrying their own DNA, still reproducing independently within your cells, still providing the abundant energy that makes your complex existence possible. The second scientific principle that shaped this remarkable partnership was the gradual integration of two previously independent biological systems. Over millions of years, the bacterial partners and their host cells became increasingly interdependent, each evolving in ways that made them more valuable to the other, while simultaneously making independent survival more difficult. The bacterial partners gradually transferred much of their genetic material to their host's nuclei, streamlining their own genomes while becoming more deeply integrated into their host's cellular processes. Think of this integration process like two separate households, gradually merging into a perfectly coordinated family unit. Over time, the bacterial partners specialized more and more in energy production, while their host cells took on increasing responsibility for genetic regulation, cellular reproduction, and interaction with the external environment. Each partner was becoming more sophisticated in their area of specialization, while becoming more dependent on their partner for essential functions they were gradually abandoning. Here's your first profound ancestral connection. Every mitochondrion in your body today is a living descendant of those ancient bacterial partners, still maintaining its own circular DNA, still reproducing through binary fission, just like free-living bacteria, still carrying the molecular machinery that was first developed by independent organisms 1.5 billion years ago. When you breathe tonight, the oxygen you inhale is being processed by cellular structures that represent one of evolution's most successful cooperative partnerships, connecting you directly to both sides of this ancient biological alliance. Consider how this endosymbiotic partnership established entirely new possibilities for biological complexity. Before mitochondria, cells were limited by the energy constraints of fermentation, capable of only relatively simple structures and processes. With their new bacterial partners providing abundant aerobic energy, cells could suddenly afford to develop sophisticated internal organizations, complex regulatory systems, elaborate cellular structures, and eventually, the energy-intensive processes that would make multicellular life possible. The relationship between your cells and their mitochondrial partners represents one of biology's most elegant examples of mutual cooperation. Your mitochondria depend on your cellular machinery for protection, for the raw materials they need for energy production, and for the genetic regulation that coordinates their activity with your body's overall energy needs. In return, they provide the abundant ATP that powers everything from your muscle contractions to your neural processing to the cellular maintenance that occurs while you sleep. Your second ancestral connection flows through every heartbeat, every thought, every moment of physical activity. The energy that powers your circulation, your breathing, your ability to think and dream and rest peacefully tonight, all of it is being generated through cooperative partnerships that began when ancient bacteria learned to live inside other cells. Your mitochondria are working right now, even as you listen to this story, using oxygen and glucose to produce the energy that sustains your consciousness, your comfort, your capacity for wonder at these ancient tailies. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this mitochondrial partnership is how it demonstrates evolution's capacity for transforming potential competitors into essential partners. These ancient bacterial cells could have remained independent organisms, competing with other cells for resources and territory. Instead, they discovered that cooperation could provide benefits that neither partner could achieve alone, establishing a collaborative relationship so successful that it became fundamental to all complex life on Earth. Your third ancestral connection reveals itself in the maternal inheritance of mitochondrial DNA, a direct link to these ancient partnerships that connects you specifically to your maternal lineage stretching back across billions of years. The mitochondria in your cells came exclusively from your mother, who inherited them from her mother, in an unbroken chain of maternal mitochondrial inheritance reaching back to those first successful endosymbiotic partnerships. You carry within every cell the living descendants of both ancient partners, the host cell ancestors through your nuclear DNA, and the bacterial partners through your mitochondrial DNA, making you a walking embodiment of evolution's most successful cooperation across the vast expanse of deep time. As we drift forward through another vast span of geological time, we witness how the ancient partnership between host cells and their mitochondrial partners gradually transformed into something entirely unprecedented in the history of life. Around 2 billion years ago, these cooperative cellular arrangements had evolved into sophisticated, integrated systems that biologists call eukaryotic cells, complex cellular organizations that would become the foundation for all multicellular life, including you. This period represents evolution's grand lesson in how cooperation can create possibilities that no individual organism could achieve alone. Picture these evolved cellular partnerships as the first great cities of the microscopic world. Where earlier cells had been like simple villages with basic infrastructure, these new eukaryotic cells were developing into elaborate metropolitan systems with specialized districts, sophisticated transportation networks, and complex organizational hierarchies. The mitochondrial partners had become the power districts, providing abundant energy to support increasingly elaborate cellular infrastructures that would have been impossible to maintain through fermentation alone. The first scientific principle underlying this revolutionary complexity was the development of what we call cellular compartmentalization, the evolution of specialized internal structures, each optimized for specific functions. Think of this like the gradual development of specialized rooms in a house that was originally just a single large space. Your eukaryotic ancestors were learning to organize their cellular interiors into distinct functional areas: nuclei for genetic storage and regulation, endoplasmic reticulum for protein manufacturing, Golgi apparatus for molecular processing and shipping, and numerous other specialized organelles, each contributing to the overall efficiency of the cellular system. The energy abundance provided by mitochondrial partners made this elaborate internal organization not just possible, but advantageous. With reliable, high-efficiency energy production handled by their bacterial partners, host cells could afford to invest energy in developing sophisticated internal structures, complex regulatory systems, and elaborate molecular machinery. They were becoming the first biological systems capable of true architectural complexity at the cellular level. But what makes this ancient cellular revolution so connected to your peaceful existence tonight is that every cell in your body represents the direct inheritance of these early eukaryotic innovations. Your neurons, with their complex branching structures and sophisticated electrical signaling systems. Your muscle cells, with their elaborate contractile machinery. Your immune cells, with their remarkable capacity for recognizing and responding to molecular patterns. All of these depend on the same basic eukaryotic cellular architecture that first evolved through this ancient symbiotic partnership. The second scientific breakthrough that characterized this period was the evolution of the nucleus, perhaps the most sophisticated information management system ever developed by living organisms. Your eukaryotic ancestors learned to sequester their genetic material within specialized membrane-bounded compartments, creating protected environments where DNA could be carefully maintained, precisely regulated, and accurately reproduced. Think of the nucleus like the central library and administrative center of the cellular city, where all the essential information for cellular function is stored, organized, and carefully controlled. This nuclear innovation represented a fundamental advance in biological information processing. By concentrating their genetic material in a protected, specialized compartment, eukaryotic cells could develop much more sophisticated systems for gene regulation, allowing them to control precisely which genes were active under specific conditions. They were becoming the first biological systems capable of complex developmental programs, elaborate responses to environmental changes, and the kind of genetic flexibility that would eventually make multicellular differentiation possible. Consider how this cellular complexity was like evolution learning to build biological computers. The nucleus served as the central processing unit, storing programs and coordinating cellular functions. The mitochondria functioned like dedicated power supplies, providing the energy needed to run increasingly sophisticated cellular software. The various organelles operated like specialized peripheral devices, each optimized for specific functions, but all integrated into a coherent, highly efficient biological system. Here's your first profound ancestral connection. Every night as you sleep, your eukaryotic cells perform sophisticated maintenance routines that directly parallel the organizational innovations developed by these ancient cellular partnerships. Your nuclear DNA is carefully proofread and repaired. Your mitochondria reproduce and regenerate. Your cellular organelles are cleaned and reorganized, all through processes that were first developed by eukaryotic ancestors, learning to manage the complexity that their symbiotic partnerships had made possible. The beauty of eukaryotic cellular organization lies in how it balanced specialization with integration. Each organelle could focus on performing specific functions with extraordinary efficiency, while sophisticated communication and coordination systems ensured that all cellular components worked together as integrated wholes. Your ancestors were establishing principles of biological organization that would become fundamental to all complex life, the same principles that allow your body's organs to specialize in specific functions while working together as a coordinated system. Your second ancestral connection flows through every complex biological process occurring in your body right now. Your immune system's ability to recognize and respond to pathogens, your nervous system's capacity for processing and integrating information, your endocrine system's sophisticated chemical communication networks. All of these depend on the eukaryotic cellular complexity that first emerged through ancient symbiotic partnerships. You are experiencing the benefits of biological innovations that began when cooperation created entirely new levels of organizational possibility. Think of this period as evolution's first experiment with what we might call biological architecture, the development of internal cellular structures that were not just functional, but elegant, efficient, and capable of supporting unprecedented levels of biological complexity. These eukaryotic cells were becoming living examples of how cooperation could transcend limitations that constrain individual organisms, creating integrated systems that were greater than the sum of their parts. The most remarkable aspect of this eukaryotic revolution is how it demonstrates that complexity itself can be an evolutionary strategy. Rather than simply becoming more efficient at basic functions, your ancestors were discovering that elaborate internal organization could open up entirely new ecological niches, new ways of interacting with their environment, new possibilities for growth, reproduction, and survival. They were establishing the biological foundation for all the complex life that would follow. Your third ancestral connection reveals itself in the remarkable fact that you are, in a very real sense, a walking ecosystem. Just as those ancient eukaryotic cells were integrated communities of formerly independent organisms, your body represents a sophisticated ecological system where trillions of eukaryotic cells, each containing their ancient mitochondrial partners, work together to create the complex, conscious, breathing being that you are tonight. You embody evolution's greatest lesson about the power of cooperation, that working together can create possibilities that no individual could achieve alone across the vast, patient expanse of deep time. As we continue our gentle drift through the cosmic timeline, approaching 1 billion years ago, we encounter one of the most transformative moments in the entire history of life on Earth. The abundant energy made available through the ancient partnership between cells and their mitochondrial partners had reached a tipping point, creating cellular systems so energy-rich, so capable of supporting complex processes, that entirely new forms of biological organization became possible. For the first time in Earth's 4 billion-year story, individual cells began to work together as coordinated multicellular organisms, establishing the foundation for all complex life, including the remarkable biological system that you represent tonight. Picture this ancient world as a vast biological laboratory where energy, abundance was opening up evolutionary possibilities that had never existed before. Single-celled eukaryotic organisms, powered by their mitochondrial partners, had become so efficient at energy production that they could afford to invest in entirely new kinds of biological experiments. Some lineages began exploring what would happen if individual cells, instead of competing for resources, could specialize in different functions while working together as integrated communities. The first scientific principle underlying this multicellular revolution was the concept of cellular differentiation, the remarkable process by which genetically identical cells can develop into specialized types with distinct functions. Think of this like members of a community deciding to focus on different skills and trades, with some becoming builders, others becoming farmers, still others becoming teachers or healers. Your multicellular ancestors were discovering that cellular cooperation could create biological systems far more capable and resilient than any individual cell could be alone. This differentiation was made possible by the sophisticated gene regulation systems that had evolved in eukaryotic nuclei. Cells could now turn different sets of genes on or off in response to chemical signals, allowing genetically identical cells to develop into muscle cells, nerve cells, digestive cells, or any of the dozens of other specialized cell types that complex organisms require. They were becoming biological systems capable of creating internal diversity while maintaining overall unity and coordination. But what makes this ancient transition so personally connected to your peaceful rest tonight is that your body represents the culmination of this multicellular experiment. Every specialized cell type in your body, from the neurons that process these words to the muscle cells that regulate your breathing, to the blood cells that carry oxygen through your circulation, traces its origins back to those first multicellular pioneers who learned to coordinate individual cellular capabilities into integrated biological communities. The energy requirements for multicellular organization were extraordinary. Individual cells had to not only maintain their own basic functions, but also invest energy in communication systems, coordination mechanisms, and specialized structures that served the needs of the larger organism rather than just the individual cell. Think of this like the difference between maintaining a single household and coordinating an entire city. The energy and organizational demands increase exponentially with complexity. The second scientific breakthrough that enabled this multicellular revolution was the evolution of sophisticated cell-to-cell communication systems. Your ancestors had to develop molecular languages that would allow individual cells to coordinate their activities, share information about environmental conditions, and respond collectively to challenges and opportunities. They evolved complex signaling molecules, specialized receptor systems, and elaborate communication networks that could coordinate the activities of millions or billions of individual cells into coherent, purposeful biological behavior. Think of these communication systems like the development of the first biological internet networks that could transmit information rapidly and accurately between distant parts of the organism, ensuring that all cellular components remained informed about the overall state of the system and could adjust their activities accordingly. This cellular communication represented one of the most sophisticated information processing systems that had ever evolved, making possible the kind of coordinated biological responses that complex life requires. Here's your first profound ancestral connection. As you rest tonight, your body is continuously maintaining the same types of cellular communication networks that first evolved in those ancient multicellular pioneers. Your nervous system, your endocrine system, your immune system, all are sophisticated descendants of the molecular communication systems that first made multicellular life possible. Every heartbeat, every breath, Every immune response represents the continuation of cellular cooperation strategies that began nearly 1 billion years ago. Consider how this transition to multicellularity was like life learning to create biological symphonies. Individual cells, each with their own capabilities and needs, had to learn to play their parts in harmony with countless others, creating coordinated performances of extraordinary complexity and beauty. Your ancestors were establishing the biological principles that would eventually make possible everything, from the coordinated muscle contractions of your heartbeat to the elaborate neural orchestration that creates your thoughts and dreams. The energy abundance that made multicellularity possible came with both opportunities and responsibilities. Complex organisms could achieve capabilities that no single cell could manage alone. Sophisticated sensory systems, elaborate behavioral responses, complex reproductive strategies, and eventually, the kind of neural processing that would make consciousness possible. But they also had to develop systems for coordinating energy distribution, ensuring that all cellular components received the resources they needed while maintaining the energy reserves necessary for growth, reproduction, and response to environmental challenges. Your second ancestral connection flows through every coordinated biological process occurring in your body right now. When you breathe, hundreds of millions of cells coordinate their activities to move air through your respiratory system and extract oxygen for distribution throughout your body. When your heart beats, countless muscle cells contract in perfect synchrony to maintain your circulation. When you think or dream, billions of neurons coordinate their electrical activities to create the complex patterns of neural processing that generate consciousness itself. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this multicellular revolution is how it represents evolution's discovery that cooperation could create emergent properties, capabilities that arise from the coordinated interaction of simpler components, but cannot be predicted from understanding those components in isolation. Your consciousness, your capacity for wonder, your ability to contemplate these ancient stories. These are emergent properties of multicellular neural networks, capabilities that exist only through the coordinated cooperation of billions of individual cells working together. Your third ancestral connection reveals itself in the profound truth that you are both an individual organism and a cellular community simultaneously. The same principles of cooperation, communication, and coordination that allowed your ancestors to make the transition from single-celled to multicellular life continue to govern every aspect of your existence. You are a living embodiment of evolution's greatest discovery about the power of cooperation, that individual components, working together with sufficient energy and coordination, can create forms of complexity and capability that transcend anything possible through individual effort alone. Across the vast, patient unfolding of deep time, as we drift forward through another magnificent span of evolutionary time, approaching 500 million years ago, we encounter one of the most elegant molecular innovations in the entire history of life. As multicellular organisms grew larger and more complex, they faced a fundamental challenge: how to deliver oxygen efficiently to every cell in their increasingly elaborate bodies. Simple diffusion, which had worked perfectly for single cells and small organisms, was no longer adequate for the energy demands of complex multicellular life. Your ancestors were about to solve this challenge through the evolution of hemoglobin, perhaps the most sophisticated oxygen transport system ever devised by nature. Picture these ancient multicellular pioneers as engineers facing their first major infrastructure challenge. They had successfully learned to coordinate the activities of millions of cells into integrated organisms. But now they needed to develop distribution systems that could ensure every cell, even those deep within the organism, received adequate oxygen for aerobic respiration. Think of this challenge like designing the circulatory system for a vast, biological city. Every neighborhood needed reliable access to the life-giving oxygen that made complex cellular processes possible. The first scientific principle underlying this remarkable innovation was the evolution of specialized oxygen-carrying molecules. Your ancestors discovered that iron atoms, when properly organized within protein structures, could bind oxygen molecules reversibly, picking up oxygen where it was abundant and releasing it where it was needed. This was like developing the perfect biological delivery truck, one that could load up with oxygen in oxygen-rich environments and automatically unload its cargo where oxygen concentrations were lower. The chemistry of hemoglobin is breathtakingly elegant in its sophistication. Each hemoglobin molecule contains 4 iron atoms, each nestled within a precisely shaped protein structure called a heme group. These iron atoms can each bind 1 oxygen molecule. But here's where the molecular engineering becomes truly remarkable. The binding of oxygen to 1 iron atom actually makes it easier for the other iron atoms in the same hemoglobin molecule to bind oxygen as well. This cooperative binding means that hemoglobin becomes increasingly efficient at picking up oxygen as oxygen concentrations rise, creating a molecular system perfectly tuned for oxygen collection in the lungs. But the real genius of hemoglobin lies in its reverse behavior in oxygen-poor environments. When oxygen concentrations drop, hemoglobin doesn't just release oxygen. It preferentially releases oxygen where it's needed most. In tissues that are working hard and consuming oxygen rapidly, hemoglobin becomes increasingly likely to give up its oxygen cargo, ensuring that the most metabolically active tissues receive priority access to this essential resource. Your ancestors were creating molecular systems capable of making sophisticated decisions about resource allocation at the cellular level. What makes this ancient innovation so personally connected to your peaceful rest tonight is that every breath you take is being supported by hemoglobin molecules that represent the direct molecular inheritance of these early oxygen transport pioneers. Right now, as you breathe slowly and deeply, approximately 270 million hemoglobin molecules in each of your red blood cells are picking up oxygen in your lungs, carrying it through your circulatory system, and delivering it precisely where your cells need it most to maintain the energy-intensive processes that sustain your complex existence. The second scientific breakthrough that characterized this period was the evolution of specialized circulatory systems designed to work in perfect harmony with hemoglobin-based oxygen transport. Your ancestors had to develop not just the molecular tools for carrying oxygen, but also the biological infrastructure for distributing these oxygen carriers throughout their increasingly complex bodies. They evolved hearts capable of pumping oxygen-rich blood to every tissue, blood vessels that could efficiently distribute this life-giving fluid, and regulatory systems that could adjust circulation patterns to match the varying oxygen demands of different tissues. Think of this integrated system like the development of the most sophisticated delivery network ever created. Hemoglobin served as the cargo containers, perfectly designed for their specific load. The circulatory system provided the transportation infrastructure, with hearts as pumping stations, arteries as major highways, and capillaries as local delivery routes reaching every cellular neighborhood. The regulatory systems acted like sophisticated traffic management, adjusting flow patterns to ensure that high-demand areas received priority service while maintaining baseline delivery to all tissues. Here's your first profound ancestral connection. Every heartbeat you experience tonight represents the continuation of circulatory innovations that first evolved to support hemoglobin-based oxygen transport systems. Your heart beats approximately 60 to 100 times per minute, each beat circulating your hemoglobin-carrying red blood cells through a vascular network so extensive that if all your blood vessels were laid end to end, they would circle the earth more than twice. You are experiencing the benefits of the most sophisticated biological distribution system ever evolved, refined across hundreds of millions of years of evolutionary innovation. Consider how this hemoglobin system represents one of evolution's most elegant examples of molecular engineering. The protein structure surrounding each iron atom is so precisely designed that it protects the iron from oxidation while allowing oxygen to bind and release freely. The overall shape of the hemoglobin molecule allows it to pack efficiently into red blood cells maximizing the oxygen-carrying capacity of the blood. Even the size and flexibility of red blood cells have been optimized to work with hemoglobin, creating disc-shaped cells that can squeeze through the tiniest capillaries, while maintaining maximum surface area for oxygen exchange. The efficiency of this system becomes even more remarkable when you consider how it responds dynamically to your body's changing needs. During periods of rest, like tonight, as you listen to this story, your hemoglobin operates at baseline efficiency, delivering adequate oxygen for your reduced metabolic demands. During periods of activity, your hemoglobin system can dramatically increase its efficiency, carrying more oxygen per molecule and delivering it more rapidly to tissues with increased energy needs. The same molecular system that sustains your peaceful rest can also support intense physical activity, demonstrating the remarkable versatility that evolution has built into this ancient innovation. Your second ancestral connection flows through every moment of physical comfort and capability you experience. Your ability to think complex thoughts, to feel emotions, to maintain the sophisticated neural processing that creates consciousness. All of this depends on the precise, moment-by-moment delivery of oxygen by hemoglobin systems that first evolved hundreds of millions of years ago. Your brain, representing only about 2% of your body weight, consumes approximately 20% of your total oxygen supply, all delivered through hemoglobin systems that represent the direct molecular inheritance of these ancient oxygen transport innovations. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of hemoglobin evolution is how it demonstrates life's capacity for creating molecular solutions that are simultaneously simple and sophisticated. At its core, hemoglobin is based on the simple chemical affinity between iron and oxygen. But this basic chemical interaction has been refined through evolutionary processes into a molecular system, so sophisticated that human engineers are still learning from its design principles. Your ancestors created molecular nanotechnology that surpasses most human engineering achievements, using nothing but the patient process of evolutionary refinement across vast periods of time. Your third ancestral connection reveals itself every time you feel the quiet satisfaction of deep, restful breathing. The oxygen entering your lungs right now is being collected by hemoglobin molecules that represent nearly 500 million years of evolutionary refinement. Every molecule of oxygen that sustains your cellular respiration, every breath that supports your peaceful rest, connects you directly to those first multicellular pioneers who solved the fundamental challenge of oxygen distribution, creating the molecular foundation that would make your kind of complex, energy-rich, conscious existence possible across the vast expanse of deep time. As we drift forward through another magnificent span of evolutionary time, approaching 400 million years ago, we encounter one of the most remarkable architectural innovations in the entire history of complex life. As your ancestors began their great transition from aquatic to terrestrial environments, they faced a fundamental challenge that would require nothing short of biological genius to solve: how to extract oxygen efficiently from air rather than water. The solution they developed, the evolution of lungs, represents one of nature's most elegant examples of biological engineering, creating gas exchange systems so sophisticated that they would make possible the energy-intensive lifestyles of all air-breathing vertebrates, including you. Picture these ancient pioneers as the first biological architects to face the challenge of designing for an entirely new medium. Water, despite being relatively low in dissolved oxygen, had provided a dense, supportive environment where gill systems could work efficiently. But air, while rich in oxygen, presented entirely different engineering challenges. It was thin, providing no structural support, and required completely different strategies for moving gases in and out of the body. Your ancestors were about to develop what would become the most efficient gas exchange systems ever evolved by complex life. The first scientific principle underlying this remarkable innovation was the development of what we call internalized respiratory surfaces. Unlike gills, which worked by exposing delicate respiratory tissues directly to the external environment, lungs represented a revolutionary approach. creating protected internal spaces where gas exchange could occur in carefully controlled conditions. Think of this transition like moving from outdoor markets to sophisticated indoor shopping centers, environments that could be precisely regulated for optimal function while providing protection from external environmental challenges. The evolution of the first primitive lungs was like nature learning to build biological bellows systems. These early respiratory organs were essentially internalized air sacs that could be inflated and deflated to move air in and out of the body, creating controlled environments where oxygen could be extracted from air and carbon dioxide could be released. Your ancestral fish were developing what would become the foundation for all vertebrate respiratory systems, establishing the basic architectural principles that would eventually be refined into the sophisticated lung systems that sustain your peaceful breathing tonight. But what makes this ancient innovation so personally connected to your rest tonight is that every breath you take uses lung systems that represent the direct architectural inheritance of these early respiratory pioneers. The basic design principles they established: internalized air spaces, controlled ventilation, protected gas exchange surfaces, integrated circulation systems, are still governing every aspect of your respiratory function as you breathe slowly and peacefully, connecting you directly to those first air-breathing vertebrates who solved the fundamental challenge of terrestrial respiration. The second scientific breakthrough that characterized this period was the development of increasingly sophisticated ventilation systems. Early lungs required active pumping mechanisms to move air in and out efficiently, leading to the evolution of specialized breathing muscles, coordinated respiratory movements, and eventually the sophisticated diaphragmatic breathing systems that power your respiration. Your ancestors were learning to create biological pumping systems that could maintain continuous, efficient airflow through their developing lung systems. Think of these early ventilation systems like learning to operate the world's first sophisticated air conditioning systems. Your ancestors had to develop coordinated muscle systems that could create the precise pressure changes needed to draw air into their lungs and then expel it efficiently. They evolved rib cage structures that could expand and contract, muscle systems that could work in perfect coordination, and eventually the diaphragmatic breathing mechanisms that create the gentle, rhythmic breathing patterns that sustain your peaceful rest tonight. The architectural sophistication of lung evolution becomes even more remarkable when you consider the surface area optimization that your ancestors achieved. Early lungs were relatively simple sacs, but over millions of years of evolutionary refinement, they developed increasingly complex internal structures designed to maximize the surface area available for gas exchange. Think of this like evolving from simple storage rooms into elaborate systems of interconnected chambers, each designed to maximize the interface between air and blood, where oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange could occur. Here's your first profound ancestral connection. The gentle rise and fall of your chest tonight as you breathe represents the direct continuation of ventilation innovations first developed by your earliest air-breathing ancestors. Your diaphragm, the large muscle beneath your lungs that creates the pressure changes driving your breathing, operates through mechanisms virtually identical to those first established by vertebrates learning to extract oxygen from air. Every peaceful breath connects you to those pioneering ancestors who solved the engineering challenge of terrestrial respiration. Consider how these evolving lung systems were like biological laboratories where your ancestors experimented with increasingly sophisticated approaches to gas exchange optimization. They developed branching airways that could distribute air efficiently throughout the lung tissue, specialized cellular surfaces optimized for rapid gas diffusion, and integrated circulatory systems that could quickly transport oxygen-rich blood away from the lungs, while bringing carbon dioxide-rich blood back for elimination. Each innovation built upon previous successes, creating respiratory systems of ever-increasing efficiency and sophistication. The beauty of lung evolution lies in how it represents one of biology's most successful examples of form following function. Every aspect of lung architecture, from the branching patterns of airways to the thinness of gas exchange surfaces, to the coordination of breathing muscles, reflects precise optimization for the specific challenge of extracting oxygen from air. Your ancestors were creating biological systems that achieved gas exchange efficiency levels that still surpass most human engineering approaches to similar challenges. Your second ancestral connection flows through the remarkable fact that your lung capacity and breathing efficiency represent hundreds of millions of years of respiratory optimization. Your lungs can extract approximately 25% of the oxygen from each breath you take, a level of efficiency that reflects the accumulated innovations of countless generations of air-breathing ancestors. When you take a deep, satisfying breath, you're experiencing the benefits of respiratory engineering that has been refined across vast periods of evolutionary time. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of lung evolution is how it established the respiratory foundation that would make high-energy terrestrial life possible. The abundant oxygen extraction, made possible by sophisticated lung systems, provided the energy foundation for complex behaviors, elaborate social systems, sophisticated sensory processing, and eventually the kind of energy-intensive neural activity that creates consciousness itself. Your ability to think, to dream, to contemplate these ancient stories while breathing peacefully tonight, all of this depends on the respiratory innovations, first developed by ancestors learning to thrive in the oxygen-rich atmosphere of the terrestrial world. Your third ancestral connection reveals itself in the automatic, unconscious coordination that governs your breathing tonight. The respiratory control centers in your brainstem that regulate your breathing rhythm, adjust your respiratory rate to match your metabolic needs, and maintain the perfect balance of oxygen and carbon dioxide in your blood. All of these represent the direct, neurological inheritance of control systems, first developed by early air-breathing vertebrates. You breathe tonight through regulatory mechanisms that have been continuously successful for hundreds of millions of years, connecting you to the deep respiratory wisdom of ancestors who transformed the challenge of breathing air into the foundation for all complex terrestrial life. As we continue our gentle journey through the vast expanse of evolutionary time, we encounter one of the most remarkable engineering solutions in the entire history of complex life. As your ancestors developed increasingly sophisticated respiratory systems and grew into larger, more complex organisms, they faced a fundamental logistical challenge: how to efficiently distribute oxygen-rich blood from their lungs to every cell throughout their bodies, while simultaneously collecting carbon dioxide-laden blood for return to the respiratory organs. The solution they evolved, specialized circulatory systems, represents one of nature's most elegant examples of biological distribution engineering, creating transportation networks so sophisticated that they make modern infrastructure seem simple by comparison. Picture these evolving organisms as the first biological city planners, tasked with designing transportation systems for increasingly complex metropolitan areas. Early circulatory systems had been relatively simple, basic pumps moving fluid through simple network patterns. But as body size and metabolic complexity increased, your ancestors had to develop what would become the most sophisticated distribution networks ever created by living systems, complete with specialized highways, local delivery routes, automated traffic management, and coordinated pumping stations that could ensure efficient service to every cellular neighborhood. The first scientific principle underlying this circulatory revolution was the development of what biologists call dual circulation systems. Your ancestors discovered that the most efficient approach to oxygen distribution required separate circulation loops, one dedicated to collecting oxygen from the lungs and distributing it throughout the body, and another focused on returning deoxygenated blood back to the respiratory organs for renewal. Think of this innovation like developing separate highway systems for incoming and outgoing traffic, preventing congestion and maximizing the efficiency of the overall transportation network. This dual circulation innovation was like learning to operate two coordinated distribution systems simultaneously. The pulmonary circulation specialized in the short, efficient transport of blood between the heart and lungs, optimized for rapid gas exchange and minimal energy expenditure. The systemic circulation became a vast network capable of reaching every tissue in the body, delivering oxygen-rich blood to cells with varying metabolic demands, while collecting the carbon dioxide and other waste products of cellular respiration. Your ancestors were creating integrated biological systems that could coordinate these two circulation loops with remarkable precision and efficiency. But what makes this ancient innovation so intimately connected to your peaceful rest tonight is that your heart and circulation continue to operate through the same dual circulation principles first, established by these early vertebrate pioneers. As you breathe slowly and rest peacefully, your heart is beating in a coordinated rhythm that sends blood first to your lungs for oxygen collection, then pumps that oxygen-rich blood throughout your entire body, ensuring that every cell receives the respiratory support it needs for optimal function, all through circulatory architecture that represents the direct inheritance of these ancient distribution innovations. The second scientific breakthrough that characterized this period was the evolution of increasingly sophisticated cardiac pumping systems. Early hearts were relatively simple organs, basic muscular pumps that could move fluid through circulation networks. But as circulatory systems became more complex and demanding, your ancestors evolved hearts with multiple chambers, specialized valves, coordinated pumping sequences, and eventually the four-chambered hearts that provide the powerful, efficient circulation that sustains your complex existence tonight. Think of cardiac evolution like developing increasingly sophisticated pumping stations for a vast municipal water system. Your ancestral hearts learned to create separate chambers for different aspects of circulation, chambers specialized for receiving blood returning from the body, chambers optimized for pumping blood to the lungs, chambers designed for receiving oxygenated blood from respiratory organs, and chambers focused on distributing that oxygen-rich blood throughout the body. Each chamber became precisely tuned for its specific role in the overall circulation process, creating cardiac systems of remarkable efficiency and reliability. The architectural elegance of these evolving circulatory systems becomes even more apparent when you consider the vessel specialization that your ancestors developed. They evolved arteries with thick, muscular walls capable of handling high-pressure blood flow from the heart. They developed veins with specialized valves and thinner walls optimized for returning blood to the heart under lower pressure conditions. Most remarkably, they created capillary networks, tiny vessels so small that blood cells must travel through them in single file, ensuring that every cell in the body has direct access to the oxygen and nutrients carried in the circulating blood. Here's your first profound ancestral connection. Every heartbeat you experience tonight represents the continuation of cardiac innovations that first evolved to support dual circulation systems in early vertebrates. Your heart beats approximately 100,000 times per day, each beat coordinating the precise sequence of chamber contractions that maintain separate pulmonary and systemic circulation loops. You are experiencing the benefits of cardiovascular engineering that represents hundreds of millions of years of evolutionary refinement, connecting you directly to those first vertebrates who developed specialized hearts capable of supporting complex respiratory systems. Consider how these circulatory innovations made possible entirely new levels of biological complexity and capability. With efficient oxygen distribution systems in place, your ancestors could develop larger brains, more complex sensory organs, sophisticated muscular systems, and elaborate behavioral capabilities that would have been impossible with simpler circulatory arrangements. They were establishing the cardiovascular foundation that would eventually support the energy-intensive lifestyles of complex vertebrates, including the remarkable neural processing that creates your consciousness tonight. The sophistication of circulatory system regulation represents one of evolution's most remarkable achievements in biological automation. Your ancestors developed cardiovascular control systems that could automatically adjust heart rate, modify blood pressure, redirect circulation to match changing metabolic demands, and maintain optimal oxygen delivery under a wide range of environmental and physiological conditions. Think of these regulatory systems like the most advanced automated traffic management systems ever created, constantly monitoring conditions throughout the circulation network and making real-time adjustments to optimize system performance. Your second ancestral connection flows through every moment of cardiovascular adaptation that your body performs automatically. When you're at rest, like tonight as you listen to this story, your circulatory system operates at baseline efficiency, providing adequate oxygen delivery while conserving energy. During periods of activity, these same systems can dramatically increase their performance, pumping more blood, delivering more oxygen, and supporting the increased metabolic demands of active tissues. The same cardiovascular architecture that sustains your peaceful rest can also support intense physical and mental activity, demonstrating the remarkable versatility that evolution has built into these ancient circulation innovations. But perhaps the most beautiful aspect of circulatory system evolution is how it represents life's mastery of distribution logistics at the biological scale. Your circulatory system tonight is simultaneously serving as a transportation network, a communication system, a waste disposal service, a temperature regulation mechanism, and an immune system patrol route. It's delivering oxygen and nutrients to every cell, removing carbon dioxide and metabolic wastes, transporting hormones and signaling molecules, distributing heat throughout your body, and carrying immune cells to wherever they might be needed. Your third ancestral connection reveals itself in the profound realization that you are sustained by what may be the most successful transportation system ever evolved. Your circulatory network, if laid out end to end, would extend for approximately 60,000 miles, enough to circle the Earth more than twice. Every second, this vast network successfully delivers oxygen and nutrients to trillions of cells, while simultaneously collecting and removing waste products, maintaining the precise chemical conditions that make complex life possible. You are experiencing tonight the culmination of cardiovascular innovations that began with simple pumps and basic circulation loops, refined across hundreds of millions of years into the most sophisticated biological distribution system ever evolved, connecting you across deep time to ancestors who transformed the challenge of oxygen distribution into the foundation for all complex, energy-rich life on Earth. As we drift forward through another vast epoch of evolutionary innovation, we witness how your ancestors became true pioneers of respiratory adaptation, learning to extract oxygen efficiently from environments as diverse as the deepest ocean trenches, the highest mountain peaks, and the most challenging terrestrial landscapes our planet has to offer. Across hundreds of millions of years of patient experimentation, life developed not just one perfect respiratory solution, but an extraordinary diversity of breathing strategies, each precisely tuned to the specific challenges and opportunities of different environments. This represents one of evolution's most beautiful demonstrations of adaptive flexibility, the same fundamental need for oxygen solved through countless creative variations. Picture the Earth as a vast laboratory where your ancestors were conducting the most comprehensive experiment in respiratory engineering ever undertaken. In the depths of the oceans, where pressure could crush most terrestrial organisms and oxygen concentrations varied dramatically with depth, some of your ancestral lineages developed respiratory systems capable of extracting every available oxygen molecule from their challenging aquatic environments. In the thin air of high altitudes, where oxygen concentrations dropped to levels that would quickly exhaust most lowland organisms, other ancestral lines evolved respiratory adaptations that could maintain adequate oxygen extraction even in the most demanding atmospheric conditions. The first scientific principle underlying this remarkable respiratory diversity was the development of what biologists call environmental specialization in gas exchange systems. Rather than evolving a single, universal respiratory solution, life discovered that the most successful strategy was to develop respiratory systems precisely tuned to specific environmental conditions. Your ancestors learned to create gills optimized for extracting dissolved oxygen from water, lungs specialized for processing atmospheric air, and eventually hybrid systems that could function efficiently in multiple environments. Think of these adaptive innovations like evolution developing the biological equivalent of specialized equipment for different extreme sports. Deep-sea diving ancestors evolved respiratory systems with enhanced oxygen storage capacity, more efficient extraction mechanisms, and sophisticated pressure adaptation systems. High-altitude climbing ancestors developed respiratory systems with increased lung capacity, enhanced oxygen-carrying blood, and more efficient cellular oxygen utilization. Each environmental challenge became an opportunity for respiratory innovation, creating the diverse array of breathing strategies that would eventually contribute to the respiratory heritage you carry tonight. But what makes this ancient story of environmental adaptation so connected to your peaceful breathing tonight is that your own respiratory system carries the genetic and physiological legacy of ancestors who successfully adapted to diverse environmental challenges. Your capacity for respiratory adaptation, your ability to adjust to different altitudes, to hold your breath when needed, to increase your breathing efficiency during physical activity, all of these represent the inheritance of adaptive innovations developed by ancestral lineages that learned to thrive in challenging respiratory environments. The second scientific breakthrough that characterized this period was the evolution of phenotypic plasticity in respiratory systems, the remarkable ability of organisms to modify their respiratory function in response to changing environmental conditions. Your ancestors discovered that the most successful approach to environmental diversity was not just to evolve fixed adaptations, but to develop respiratory systems capable of adjusting their function dynamically to match environmental demands. This respiratory plasticity was like learning to build biological systems that could reconfigure themselves for optimal performance under different conditions. Ancestors living in variable environments evolved respiratory systems that could increase their efficiency when oxygen was scarce, adjust their ventilation patterns when atmospheric pressure changed, modify their oxygen transport capacity when metabolic demands fluctuated, and even alter their cellular metabolism when environmental conditions required different energy strategies. They were creating adaptive respiratory systems rather than just fixed respiratory solutions. Consider how these environmental adaptations demonstrate life's extraordinary creativity in solving the fundamental challenge of oxygen access. In the crushing depths of the deep ocean, your ancestors evolved respiratory systems that could function under pressures that would collapse normal lung tissue. In the oxygen-depleted waters of high-altitude lakes, they developed gills with enhanced surface area and more efficient countercurrent flow systems. In the thin atmosphere of mountain peaks, they evolved enlarged hearts, increased lung capacity, and enhanced oxygen-carrying blood that could maintain adequate cellular respiration even when atmospheric oxygen concentrations dropped to challenging levels. Here's your first profound ancestral connection. Your body's ability to adapt to different environmental conditions represents the direct inheritance of respiratory plasticity that first evolved in ancestors facing diverse environmental challenges. When you travel to higher altitudes, your body automatically begins producing more red blood cells to enhance oxygen transport, a response that traces back to high-altitude adaptations developed by ancestral populations. When you exercise intensely, your respiratory rate automatically increases to meet increased oxygen demands, an adaptive response refined over millions of years of evolutionary experience with varying metabolic challenges. The beauty of environmental respiratory adaptation lies in how it reveals the fundamental unity underlying life's diversity. While different environments require different respiratory solutions, all of these adaptations were variations on the same basic themes of oxygen extraction, transport, and utilization. Your marine ancestors, your terrestrial ancestors, and your high-altitude ancestors were all solving the same fundamental problem: how to maintain adequate cellular respiration, but each lineage developed solutions precisely tuned to their specific environmental circumstances. Think of this environmental diversity like a vast biological encyclopedia of respiratory strategies, where each environment contributed unique chapters to life's growing understanding of how to extract oxygen efficiently under different conditions. The deep ocean taught lessons about pressure adaptation and oxygen conservation. High-altitude environments provided masterclasses in efficiency optimization and enhanced oxygen transport. Variable environments offered training in respiratory flexibility and rapid adaptation. Each environmental challenge expanded life's repertoire of respiratory possibilities. Your second ancestral connection flows through the remarkable respiratory resilience that you inherit from ancestors who survived in challenging environments. Your ability to hold your breath when necessary traces back to ancestors who needed enhanced oxygen storage for diving or surviving in low oxygen conditions. Your capacity to increase your respiratory efficiency during physical activity reflects adaptations first developed by ancestors who needed to maintain adequate oxygen delivery during high-energy activities like hunting, migration, or escaping predators. Your respiratory system tonight represents the culmination of environmental adaptive strategies developed across hundreds of millions of years of evolutionary experience. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of environmental respiratory adaptation is how it demonstrates evolution's commitment to finding solutions rather than accepting limitations. When faced with environments that seemed impossible for oxygen-breathing life, your ancestors didn't abandon the challenge. They innovated. They developed respiratory strategies for the deepest oceans, the highest mountains, the most oxygen-depleted environments our planet could offer. They proved that with sufficient evolutionary time and creative adaptation, life could learn to breathe successfully almost anywhere oxygen was available. Your third ancestral connection reveals itself in the profound realization that your peaceful breathing tonight represents the synthesis of respiratory wisdom gathered from every major environment on Earth. The efficiency of your oxygen extraction reflects lessons learned in oxygen-depleted waters. The strength of your respiratory muscles incorporates innovations developed for high-altitude breathing. The flexibility of your respiratory control systems draws on adaptations refined in variable environmental conditions. You are breathing tonight through respiratory systems that represent the accumulated environmental wisdom of ancestors who learned to thrive in every corner of our planet, connecting you across deep time to the extraordinary diversity of life's respiratory solutions across the vast range of Earth's breathing environments. As we continue our gentle journey through the vast tapestry of evolutionary time, we arrive at one of the most sophisticated and beautiful aspects of the oxygen revolution, the development of complex metabolic systems that could orchestrate the controlled burning of sugars with oxygen to produce energy with unprecedented efficiency and elegance. Over millions of years of biochemical refinement, your ancestors transformed the simple chemical reaction between glucose and oxygen into an elaborate molecular symphony involving hundreds of enzymes, dozens of intermediate compounds, and intricate regulatory systems that could extract maximum energy while maintaining perfect cellular harmony. Picture your cells tonight as vast molecular cities where thousands of metabolic workers coordinate their activities in perfect synchronization. In this cellular metropolis, glucose molecules arrive like fuel deliveries to power plants, while oxygen flows through specialized distribution networks to reach every energetic process that needs it. The transformation of these raw materials into cellular energy occurs not through crude burning, but through an elegant biochemical dance where each step is carefully choreographed, each reaction precisely controlled, and each energy capture optimized for maximum efficiency and sustainability. The first scientific principle underlying this metabolic sophistication is what biochemists call the citric acid cycle, perhaps the most beautiful and efficient energy extraction system ever evolved by life. Think of this cycle like a perfectly designed recycling plant where glucose molecules are systematically dismantled, with each chemical bond broken in a controlled sequence that captures the maximum possible energy while preparing the molecular components for reuse in subsequent reactions. Your ancestors developed this system through millions of years of evolutionary refinement, creating metabolic machinery so sophisticated that it continues to awe scientists who study its intricate molecular choreography. This citric acid cycle operates like a molecular carousel, where organic molecules are passed from one enzyme to another in a precise sequence, each transfer extracting energy while transforming the substrate into the perfect configuration for the next enzymatic step. 8 separate enzymes work in perfect coordination, each catalyzing a specific reaction that contributes to the overall goal of extracting energy from glucose while producing the raw materials needed for cellular maintenance and growth. Your ancestors were creating metabolic systems that represent some of the most sophisticated molecular engineering ever achieved by biological systems. But what makes this ancient metabolic innovation so intimately connected to your peaceful rest tonight is that every cell in your body continues to operate through these same citric acid cycle pathways. Right now, as you breathe slowly and rest comfortably, trillions of cellular citric acid cycles are operating in perfect synchrony throughout your body, extracting energy from the glucose in your bloodstream and combining it with the oxygen from your lungs to produce the ATP that powers everything from your neural processing to your heart circulation to the cellular maintenance that occurs during sleep. The second scientific breakthrough that characterizes complex metabolism is the evolution of what biochemists call the electron transport chain, a molecular assembly line, where the energy extracted from glucose is captured and converted into the universal cellular energy currency of ATP. Think of this system like the most sophisticated power generation facility ever designed, where electrons extracted from glucose molecules are passed through a series of molecular machines, each transfer capturing energy that is ultimately used to produce ATP molecules with remarkable efficiency and precision. The electron transport chain represents one of evolution's most elegant solutions to the challenge of energy conversion. Rather than simply burning glucose and losing most of the energy as heat, your ancestors learned to capture the electrons from glucose breakdown and pass them through a series of protein complexes embedded in mitochondrial membranes. Each electron transfer releases a precisely controlled amount of energy that is used to pump protons across cellular membranes, creating electrochemical gradients that serve as molecular batteries, storing energy for ATP production. Think of this system like a perfectly engineered hydroelectric plant, where the flow of electrons creates an electrical gradient that drives molecular turbines to produce ATP. The protein complexes in the electron transport chain operate like biological dynamos, converting the chemical energy of electron flow into the electrochemical energy of proton gradients, which is then converted into the chemical energy of ATP bonds. Your ancestors were developing molecular energy conversion systems that achieve efficiency levels that still inspire human engineers studying renewable energy technologies. Here's your first profound ancestral connection. Every moment of consciousness you experience tonight depends on these complex metabolic systems, operating with extraordinary precision and efficiency in your brain cells. Your neurons consume approximately 20% of your total energy budget, even though they represent only about 2% of your body weight. This energy-intensive neural processing is made possible by the same complex metabolic pathways that your ancestors first developed, refined into systems capable of supporting the high energy demands of sophisticated consciousness and complex cognitive processing. Consider how this metabolic complexity represents the culmination of nearly 2 billion years of biochemical innovation. Your ancestors began with simple fermentation systems that could extract only minimal energy from available resources. Through patient evolutionary refinement, they developed increasingly sophisticated metabolic pathways, eventually creating integrated systems capable of extracting nearly 20 times more energy from the same glucose molecules that had powered their earliest cellular ancestors. They were achieving metabolic efficiency levels that made possible entirely new categories of biological complexity and capability. The beauty of complex metabolism lies in its remarkable regulatory sophistication. Your metabolic systems don't just burn glucose at a constant rate, they adjust their activity dynamically to match your body's changing energy needs. During rest, like tonight as you listen to this story, your metabolic systems operate at baseline levels, producing adequate ATP while conserving resources for cellular maintenance and repair. During periods of activity, these same systems can dramatically increase their output, providing the abundant energy needed for muscle contraction, sensory processing, and behavioral responses. Your second ancestral connection flows through the metabolic flexibility that allows your body to adapt to different nutritional and energetic conditions. When glucose is abundant, your metabolic systems preferentially use glucose as fuel through the complex pathways we've explored. When glucose becomes scarce, your metabolism can shift to alternative fuel sources like fats and proteins, demonstrating the metabolic adaptability that your ancestors developed to survive in environments with variable food availability. This metabolic versatility represents millions of years of evolutionary experience with the challenges of maintaining adequate energy production under changing environmental conditions. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of complex metabolism is how it demonstrates evolution's capacity for creating systems that are simultaneously robust and delicate, powerful and precise. Your metabolic pathways can generate enormous amounts of energy when needed, yet they operate with such precision that they rarely produce harmful byproducts or waste energy through inefficient processes. They are resilient enough to continue functioning under challenging conditions, yet sensitive enough to respond instantly to subtle changes in cellular energy demands. Your third ancestral connection reveals itself in the profound realization that you are powered tonight by what may be the most sophisticated energy production system ever evolved. The complex metabolic pathways operating in your cells represent the culmination of nearly 2 billion years of biochemical innovation, refined through countless generations of evolutionary testing and optimization. Every thought you think, every dream you experience, every moment of peaceful rest is sustained by metabolic systems that transform simple molecules into the energy of consciousness itself, connecting you across deep time to ancestors who learned to burn glucose and oxygen not just efficiently, but with the molecular artistry that makes complex life possible across the vast expanse of evolutionary time. As we drift into another profound chapter of evolutionary innovation, we encounter one of the most remarkable achievements in the entire history of nervous system evolution. As your ancestors developed increasingly complex respiratory systems and sophisticated metabolic demands, they faced a fundamental challenge: how to coordinate and regulate breathing in ways that could automatically match oxygen delivery to the constantly changing needs of complex, active organisms. The solution they evolved: specialized neural control centers, capable of managing respiratory function with extraordinary precision and reliability, represents one of the most sophisticated automatic control systems ever developed by biological evolution. Picture these ancient neural pioneers as the first biological engineers to tackle the challenge of creating automatic life support systems. They needed to develop neural circuits that could monitor the chemical composition of blood and tissues, detect changing metabolic demands, coordinate the complex muscle movements required for breathing, and adjust respiratory patterns in real time to maintain optimal oxygen and carbon dioxide levels throughout the body. Your ancestors were creating the biological equivalent of the most advanced automated systems ever designed, but with the additional requirement that these systems could never fail, never take breaks, and never require conscious oversight. The first scientific principle underlying this respiratory control revolution was the evolution of what neuroscientists call the brainstem respiratory center, a collection of specialized neural circuits located in the most ancient and fundamental part of your brain. These respiratory control circuits operate below the level of consciousness, automatically generating the rhythmic neural signals that drive your breathing muscles in coordinated patterns that have been refined across hundreds of millions of years of evolutionary testing. Think of these circuits like biological pacemakers that create the fundamental rhythm of life itself, the steady, reliable pattern of inhalation and exhalation that sustains your existence without requiring any conscious effort or attention. The sophistication of these brainstem respiratory centers becomes even more remarkable when you consider their capacity for dynamic regulation. They don't just generate a fixed breathing pattern, they continuously monitor chemical sensors throughout your body, receiving real-time information about oxygen levels, carbon dioxide concentrations, blood pH, and metabolic activity, and automatically adjust your breathing rate, depth, and pattern to maintain optimal cellular respiration under constantly changing conditions. Your ancestors were developing neural systems capable of managing complex physiological processes with a precision and reliability that surpasses most human-engineered control systems. But what makes this ancient neural innovation so intimately connected to your peaceful rest tonight is that the same brainstem, respiratory centers that first evolved in early vertebrates, continue to govern every breath you take. Right now, as you listen to this story and breathe slowly and peacefully, these ancient neural circuits are working automatically and invisibly, coordinating the contraction and relaxation of your breathing muscles, monitoring your blood chemistry, and adjusting your respiratory rhythm to match your relaxed metabolic state, all without any conscious input or awareness on your part. The second scientific breakthrough that characterized this period was the evolution of increasingly sophisticated sensory systems for monitoring respiratory status. Your ancestors developed specialized chemoreceptor cells that could detect minute changes in blood oxygen and carbon dioxide levels, pressure sensors that could monitor the mechanical aspects of breathing, and integrated neural networks that could process this complex sensory information and translate it into appropriate respiratory adjustments. Think of these sensory monitoring systems like the most comprehensive environmental monitoring network ever developed, with sensors distributed throughout your body, continuously reporting on the status of cellular respiration, tissue oxygenation, and metabolic activity. Your carotid bodies, located near your major arteries, monitor blood oxygen and carbon dioxide levels with extraordinary sensitivity. Your central chemoreceptors, located in your brainstem, detect changes in brain tissue pH that reflect carbon dioxide levels in your blood. These sensors work together to provide your respiratory control centers with the real-time information needed to maintain optimal respiratory function under all conditions. The integration of this sensory information represents one of evolution's most sophisticated examples of biological feedback control. Your respiratory control centers don't just respond to individual sensor inputs. They integrate multiple streams of information, weigh different priorities, predict future needs based on current trends, and generate coordinated respiratory responses that optimize overall physiological function. They're like biological artificial intelligence systems that can process complex, multidimensional data and generate optimal control responses in real time. Here's your first profound ancestral connection. The automatic nature of your breathing tonight demonstrates the remarkable success of neural control systems that first evolved in early vertebrates. You don't have to remember to breathe, decide when to inhale, or consciously adjust your breathing rate to match your metabolic needs. These essential functions are managed automatically by brainstem circuits that represent hundreds of millions of years of evolutionary refinement, freeing your conscious mind to focus on other activities, while your most fundamental life support systems operate reliably in the background. Consider how this automatic respiratory control represents one of evolution's most elegant solutions to the challenge of managing complex physiological systems. Breathing requires the coordination of dozens of muscles, the integration of multiple sensory inputs, and the continuous adjustment of respiratory patterns to match changing metabolic demands. Yet this extraordinarily complex process occurs so automatically and reliably that you rarely even notice it happening, allowing you to direct your conscious attention to other activities, while your respiratory control systems maintain optimal cellular respiration with remarkable efficiency and precision. The beauty of respiratory neural control lies in its capacity for both automatic regulation and conscious override. Your brainstem respiratory centers can manage breathing automatically under most conditions, but your cortical brain regions can also take conscious control when needed, allowing you to hold your breath, control your breathing for speaking or singing, or modify your respiratory patterns for specific activities. This dual control system provides both the reliability of automatic regulation and the flexibility of conscious control, demonstrating evolution's skill at creating systems that are both robust and adaptable. Your second ancestral connection flows through the remarkable fact that your respiratory control systems operate continuously throughout your entire lifetime, never taking breaks, never requiring maintenance shutdowns, and never failing to maintain adequate oxygen delivery to your tissues. From your first breath at birth to your final breath at the end of life, these neural control systems work tirelessly to sustain your cellular respiration, representing one of the most reliable and enduring examples of biological automation ever evolved. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of respiratory neural control is how it demonstrates evolution's capacity for creating systems that can manage extraordinary complexity while maintaining elegant simplicity. The coordination of breathing involves the integration of multiple sensory inputs, the generation of coordinated motor outputs, the prediction of future metabolic needs, and the continuous optimization of respiratory efficiency. Yet from your perspective, breathing simply happens automatically, effortlessly, and reliably, allowing you to rest peacefully tonight while these ancient neural systems maintain the respiratory foundation that sustains your existence. Your third ancestral connection reveals itself in the profound realization that your peaceful breathing tonight represents the culmination of neural control innovations that began when simple nervous systems first learned to coordinate basic respiratory movements. The brainstem respiratory centers that govern your breathing are direct evolutionary descendants of neural circuits that first evolved in early vertebrates, refined across hundreds of millions of years into control systems of extraordinary sophistication and reliability. You breathe tonight through neural systems that represent the accumulated wisdom of countless generations of ancestors who learned to create automatic life support systems, connecting you across deep time to the fundamental neural innovations that made complex, conscious, breathing life possible. As we approach the culmination of our gentle journey through the vast story of respiratory evolution, we encounter some of the most remarkable and inspiring chapters in life's long experiment with breathing, the evolution of organisms capable of thriving in environments where oxygen levels would quickly overwhelm most complex life forms. From the crushing depths of ocean trenches to the thin air of the highest mountain peaks, from the oxygen-depleted waters of remote lakes to the challenging conditions of underground caves, your ancestral lineages developed respiratory adaptations so extraordinary that they redefined what seemed possible for oxygen-breathing life on our planet. Picture these extreme environment pioneers as evolution's most dedicated problem solvers, facing respiratory challenges that pushed the very boundaries of what complex life could achieve. Where most organisms would quickly succumb to oxygen deprivation, these remarkable ancestors found ways to extract adequate oxygen from seemingly impossible conditions. Where most respiratory systems would fail under extreme pressure or in oxygen-poor atmospheres, these pioneering lineages developed innovations that allowed them not just to survive, but to thrive in Earth's most challenging breathing environments. The first scientific principle underlying these extreme adaptations was the evolution of what physiologists call hypoxia tolerance, the remarkable ability to maintain normal cellular function, even when oxygen availability drops to levels that would quickly incapacitate most organisms. Your ancestors developed cellular systems that could operate efficiently on minimal oxygen, metabolic pathways that could switch to alternative energy production strategies when aerobic respiration became impossible, and physiological mechanisms that could maintain adequate oxygen delivery to essential organs even under the most challenging conditions. Think of these hypoxia adaptations like developing biological systems capable of operating efficiently on emergency power. When oxygen levels dropped below normal thresholds, these adapted organisms could automatically shift their cellular machinery into high-efficiency modes, reducing non-essential energy expenditure while maintaining critical life processes. They evolved enhanced oxygen storage systems, more efficient oxygen transport mechanisms, and cellular metabolic pathways that could maintain adequate energy production even when oxygen became scarce, demonstrating life's extraordinary capacity for adapting to seemingly impossible environmental challenges. But what makes this ancient story of extreme adaptation so connected to your peaceful breathing tonight is that your own respiratory system carries genetic and physiological legacies from these extreme environment specialists. Your ability to adapt to higher altitudes, to hold your breath when necessary, to maintain consciousness and cognitive function even when oxygen levels fluctuate. All of these capabilities represent the inheritance of adaptive innovations first, developed by ancestral lineages that learned to thrive in oxygen-challenging environments. The second scientific breakthrough that characterized these extreme adaptations was the evolution of what biologists call respiratory flexibility, the remarkable ability to modify respiratory function dynamically in response to changing oxygen availability. Rather than being locked into fixed respiratory strategies, these adapted organisms developed systems that could adjust their breathing patterns, modify their oxygen utilization efficiency, enhance their oxygen transport capacity, and even alter their metabolic priorities to match available oxygen resources. This respiratory flexibility was like evolution developing biological systems with multiple operating modes, each optimized for different oxygen availability scenarios. Under normal oxygen conditions, these organisms could operate at full capacity, supporting complex behaviors, sophisticated sensory processing, and elaborate metabolic activities. When oxygen became limited, they could automatically shift to conservation modes, maintaining essential life processes while reducing energy expenditure on non-critical functions. Some lineages even developed the ability to enter temporary states of reduced metabolic activity, essentially hibernating through periods of extreme oxygen scarcity until conditions improved. Consider how these extreme environment adaptations demonstrate life's refusal to accept limitations as permanent barriers. When faced with environments that seemed impossible for complex oxygen-breathing organisms, these ancestral pioneers didn't retreat to easier habitats. They innovated. They developed enhanced hemoglobin systems with greater oxygen-carrying capacity, enlarged hearts capable of pumping blood more efficiently under challenging conditions, modified lung structures that could extract oxygen more completely from each breath, and cellular systems that could function adequately even when oxygen levels dropped to seemingly impossible thresholds. Here's your first profound ancestral connection. Your body's ability to adapt to challenging respiratory conditions represents the direct inheritance of these extreme environment specialists. When you travel to high altitudes, your body automatically begins producing more red blood cells and increasing your lung capacity, responses that trace directly back to high-altitude adaptations developed by ancestral populations. When you exercise intensely and oxygen demand exceeds immediate supply, your cells can temporarily shift to alternative energy production pathways developed by ancestors who learned to function in oxygen-limited conditions. The beauty of these extreme adaptations lies in how they reveal the extraordinary reserves and capabilities built into respiratory systems through millions of years of evolutionary testing. Your normal, comfortable breathing tonight represents only a fraction of your respiratory system's actual capabilities. Hidden within your genes and physiology are adaptive responses developed by ancestors who faced the most challenging breathing conditions our planet could offer, creating biological systems with remarkable resilience and flexibility that remain available to you should environmental conditions ever require their activation. Think of these extreme environment innovations like biological insurance policies written by evolutionary experience. The vast majority of your respiratory function operates within comfortable, normal parameters, but your system retains the genetic memory and physiological capacity for extraordinary performance should circumstances require it. Your ancestors faced every possible respiratory challenge that Earth's environments could present, and they developed solutions that remain encoded in your biological inheritance, ready to be activated if ever needed. Your second ancestral connection flows through the remarkable respiratory resilience that allows you to maintain consciousness and function even when oxygen availability fluctuates. Your brain has evolved sophisticated systems for maintaining adequate oxygen supply, even under challenging conditions, demonstrating the neural adaptations developed by ancestors who needed to maintain cognitive function in oxygen-variable environments. Your respiratory control systems can automatically adjust breathing patterns to optimize oxygen extraction, drawing on regulatory innovations refined through millions of years of experience with environmental respiratory challenges. But perhaps the most inspiring aspect of these extreme adaptations is how they demonstrate evolution's fundamental optimism about life's possibilities. Rather than accepting that complex organisms must be limited to optimal environments, your ancestors pushed the boundaries of what seemed biologically possible, expanding the range of conditions where complex, conscious, breathing life could not only survive but flourish. They proved that with sufficient evolutionary time and creative adaptation, life could learn to breathe successfully in environments that initially seemed completely impossible for oxygen-dependent organisms. Your third ancestral connection reveals itself in the profound realization that your comfortable, peaceful breathing tonight is supported by respiratory systems tested and proven under the most extreme conditions our planet could offer. The same biological machinery that sustains your rest has been forged by evolutionary experience in crushing ocean depths, tested in oxygen-depleted high-altitude environments, refined in the challenging conditions of underground habitats, and proven capable of supporting complex life under circumstances that would defeat less thoroughly tested systems. You breathe tonight through respiratory systems that represent not just normal biological function, but the culmination of life's most ambitious experiments in extreme respiratory adaptation, connecting you across deep time to ancestors who proved that where there is oxygen, however scarce, their life can learn to breathe and thrive across the vast expanse of evolutionary possibility. As we approach the end of our gentle journey through deep time, we arrive at one of the most personally intimate connections you have to this vast evolutionary story. Within every cell of your body tonight, living and breathing alongside your nuclear DNA, are tiny structures that carry their own genetic material that connects you in an unbroken chain exclusively to your maternal lineage, stretching back not just through human history, but through the entire 2 billion-year story of eukaryotic life. Your mitochondria carry their own DNA, separate from your nuclear genes, and this mitochondrial DNA is passed down exclusively through the maternal line, creating a molecular record of maternal ancestry that extends back to the very dawn of complex cellular life. Picture this remarkable inheritance like a secret library hidden within each of your cells. While your nuclear DNA represents a combination of genetic contributions from both parents, mixed and recombined in new patterns with each generation, your mitochondrial DNA tells a different story. It carries the direct, largely unchanged genetic signature of your maternal ancestors. Each mitochondrial genome, a molecular time capsule that has been faithfully copied and passed down through millions of generations of mothers to daughters. From the present moment all the way back to those first successful endosymbiotic partnerships that created eukaryotic life. The first scientific principle underlying this remarkable maternal inheritance is the unique biology of mitochondrial reproduction. Unlike nuclear DNA, which undergoes elaborate recombination processes during sexual reproduction, mitochondrial DNA is typically inherited as exact copies from the maternal line. During fertilization, the sperm contributes nuclear DNA, but virtually no mitochondria to the developing embryo. This means that the mitochondria in your cells today are essentially identical to those in your mother's cells, which were identical to those in her mother's cells, in an unbroken chain of cellular inheritance extending back through geological time. Think of your mitochondrial DNA like an ancient genealogical record written in molecular language. Every mitochondrial genome in your body carries approximately 37 genes, all dedicated to maintaining the sophisticated biochemical machinery that produces the energy your cells need to function. But these genes also carry subtle molecular signatures that can be traced back through maternal lineages, creating genetic breadcrumbs that scientists can follow to reconstruct the deep history of human maternal ancestry, and, even more remarkably, the evolutionary relationships between all eukaryotic life forms. But what makes this mitochondrial inheritance so profoundly connected to your peaceful existence tonight is that these ancient genetic passengers are not just passive historical records. They are active, living participants in every moment of your cellular life. Right now, as you breathe quietly and rest, your mitochondrial genes are directing the production of the proteins needed for aerobic respiration, coordinating the molecular machinery that transforms oxygen and glucose into the ATP that powers your thoughts, maintains your circulation, and sustains the complex biochemical processes that keep you alive and conscious. The beauty of mitochondrial inheritance lies in how it connects you to the deep maternal wisdom of cellular life. These organelles have been successfully navigating the challenges of cellular energy production for nearly 2 billion years, accumulating molecular innovations and adaptive refinements that represent the collective problem-solving efforts of countless generations of cellular ancestors. Every mitochondrion in your body carries the genetic legacy of this ancient learning, the molecular memory of how to survive and thrive in an oxygen-rich world. The second scientific principle that makes mitochondrial inheritance so remarkable is how it demonstrates the extraordinary fidelity of cellular memory across vast spans of time. While nuclear DNA undergoes constant recombination and mutation, creating genetic diversity with each generation, mitochondrial DNA has remained relatively stable, faithfully preserving ancient genetic information across billions of years of cellular reproduction. This stability means that the basic biochemical pathways operating in your mitochondria tonight are virtually identical to those that powered your earliest eukaryotic ancestors, connecting you directly to the fundamental energy innovations that made complex life possible. Consider how this mitochondrial inheritance represents one of biology's most enduring examples of successful partnership. The ancient bacterial ancestors that became your mitochondria made a bargain with their eukaryotic hosts nearly 2 billion years ago. They would provide abundant cellular energy in exchange for protection and resources. That original partnership agreement is still being honored in every cell of your body tonight, with your mitochondrial partners continuing to provide the energy that sustains your existence while your cellular machinery provides them with the raw materials and protective environment they need to survive and reproduce. Here's your first profound ancestral connection. The mitochondrial DNA in your cells tonight can be traced back through an unbroken maternal lineage to a single woman who lived in Africa approximately 200,000 years ago, a woman that scientists call mitochondrial Eve, not because she was the only woman alive at that time, but because her mitochondrial lineage is the only one that has survived to the present day in all modern humans. Every person alive today carries mitochondrial DNA that can be traced back to this single maternal ancestor, making all of humanity a vast extended family connected through ancient mitochondrial inheritance. But this connection extends far beyond human ancestry. Your mitochondrial DNA also connects you to the broader family of all eukaryotic life. The same basic mitochondrial genes that power your cells tonight are recognizably similar to the mitochondrial genes found in plants, fungi, and other complex organisms, all tracing back to those original endosymbiotic partnerships that created the first eukaryotic cells. You share mitochondrial ancestry not just with all humans, but with every tree in the forest, every flower in the garden, every complex organism that has ever evolved on Earth. Your second ancestral connection flows through the remarkable fact that your mitochondria maintain their own independent reproductive cycles within your cells. Unlike most other cellular components, which are manufactured by your nuclear genes and cellular machinery, your mitochondria reproduce themselves through a process virtually identical to bacterial reproduction. They simply divide in half when they need to increase their numbers. This means that the mitochondria in your cells tonight are the direct cellular descendants of mitochondria that have been reproducing continuously for nearly 2 billion years, maintaining their ancient bacterial identity while serving as essential partners in complex cellular life. Think of your body as a living embassy, where two very different but complementary forms of life have learned to work together in perfect harmony. Your nuclear DNA, inherited from both parents, directs the overall organization and development of your body. Your mitochondrial DNA, inherited exclusively from your mother, manages the essential energy production that makes complex cellular processes possible. Together, these two genetic systems create the integrated biological symphony that sustains your existence, each playing their specialized part in the larger composition of your life. Your third ancestral connection reveals itself in the profound realization that you are literally powered by ancient wisdom. Every ATP molecule produced in your mitochondria tonight is created through biochemical pathways that have been refined across nearly 2 billion years of evolutionary experimentation. The energy that sustains your thoughts, your dreams, your peaceful breathing as you rest, all of this flows from molecular systems that represent the accumulated problem-solving intelligence of countless generations of cellular ancestors, preserved and passed down through the unbroken chain of maternal, mitochondrial inheritance that connects you to the very dawn of complex life on Earth. And now, dear fellow traveler through deep time, we arrive at this present moment. Tonight, as you breathe slowly and peacefully, as your heart beats steadily, as consciousness flows gently through neural networks powered by ancient cellular partnerships. Every breath you take tonight carries within it the entire 2.5 billion year story we have just explored together. The oxygen entering your lungs was first produced by cyanobacterial ancestors learning to harvest sunlight. The cellular machinery processing that oxygen in your mitochondria represents the direct molecular inheritance of ancient bacterial partners who learn to transform poison into power. The complex coordination that allows your body to extract energy from each breath depends on innovations, first developed by multicellular pioneers who learned to make cooperation the foundation of complex existence. Picture yourself in this quiet moment as the living culmination of the greatest energy revolution in the history of life. Your peaceful breathing tonight connects you directly to every major breakthrough in the evolution of cellular respiration. The first fermentation experiments in oxygen-free seas, the revolutionary discovery of photosynthesis, the transformation of oxygen from deadly poison to essential fuel, the elegant partnership between host cells and their mitochondrial allies, the development of complex oxygen transport systems, and the emergence of the sophisticated respiratory networks that now sustain your rest with such quiet efficiency. The first scientific principle that makes this moment so remarkable is the extraordinary continuity of life's energy systems across vast spans of geological time. The basic biochemical pathways operating in your cells tonight, glycolysis, the citric acid cycle, the electron transport chain, are virtually identical to processes that first evolved billions of years ago. Your cellular respiration is not just similar to ancient respiratory processes. It is the direct molecular continuation of those ancient innovations, refined and perfected, but fundamentally unchanged across the vast expanse of evolutionary time. You are breathing through biochemical systems that represent unbroken chains of successful energy innovation, stretching back to the dawn of complex life. Consider how your breath tonight embodies the patient accumulation of evolutionary wisdom. Each inhalation draws in oxygen, that may have been cycling through Earth's atmosphere and biosphere for billions of years, having been produced and consumed by countless generations of photosynthetic organisms. Each exhalation releases carbon dioxide that will be captured by plants and transformed back into oxygen, continuing cycles of atmospheric exchange that began when the first cyanobacteria learned to split water molecules using the energy of sunlight. You are participating in planetary respiratory rhythms that connect you to every oxygen-producing and oxygen-consuming organism that has ever lived. But what makes this moment so profoundly beautiful is how it represents the convergence of scales, both vast and intimate. The 2.5 billion year story of cellular respiration that we have explored together culminates in this immediate, personal experience of peaceful breathing. The cosmic drama of oxygen evolution, the epic partnerships between ancient cells, the revolutionary development of complex energy systems. All of this grand evolutionary history exists not as distant abstract concepts, but as the living, breathing reality of your existence tonight. Your breath is simultaneously the most ordinary and the most extraordinary thing imaginable. Ordinary because breathing is so automatic, so fundamental to your existence that you rarely think about it consciously. Extraordinary because each breath represents the culmination of nearly 3 billion years of evolutionary innovation, the coordination of countless molecular systems inherited from ancient cellular partnerships, and the continuation of energy cycles that connect you to every form of life that has ever evolved on Earth. The second scientific truth that makes this moment so sacred is the realization that you are not just a beneficiary of this ancient evolutionary story, you are its active continuation. Your mitochondria are reproducing right now, passing on their ancient bacterial legacy to new generations of cellular partners. Your respiratory system is processing oxygen through pathways that will be inherited by future generations, connecting them to the same ancient energy systems that connect you to your ancestral past. You are simultaneously the product of deep time and the active participant in evolution's ongoing story, a conscious moment in life's continuous exploration of what it means to transform energy into awareness, matter into meaning. Consider how your breathing tonight represents the culmination of evolution's greatest lesson about cooperation and partnership. The oxygen you inhale was produced through the cooperative partnership between plants and their chloroplast partners, descendants of ancient cyanobacteria. The cellular processing of that oxygen depends on the cooperative partnership between your cells and their mitochondrial partners, descendants of ancient bacteria. Your conscious awareness of breathing emerges from the cooperative partnership between billions of neurons working together in your brain. Every breath embodies the fundamental truth that complexity, consciousness, and life itself emerge through cooperation across vast scales of time and organization. Here's your final, most profound ancestral connection. As you breathe peacefully tonight, you are experiencing the culmination of life's longest-running experiment in sustainable energy production. For 2.5 billion years, life has been refining systems for capturing, transforming, and utilizing energy in ways that can continue across geological timescales. Your respiration tonight represents the current state of this ongoing experiment, sophisticated enough to support the energy demands of consciousness itself, sustainable enough to have continued across vast periods of evolutionary time, and elegant enough to operate so smoothly that you can rest peacefully while your cells perform the most complex energy transformations ever evolved. Think of your breath as a bridge across deep time, connecting this present moment to the ancient dawn of cellular respiration. Every oxygen molecule entering your lungs carries with it the possibility that it has participated in this cycle of life and respiration countless times before. Perhaps it was once processed by a dinosaur's respiratory system, or released by a prehistoric forest, or produced by ancient algae floating in Precambrian seas. The same atoms that sustained your earliest respiratory ancestors are sustaining you tonight, in an endless cycle of energy and renewal that makes you a direct participant in Earth's most fundamental life processes. Your breathing tonight also represents the remarkable success of evolution's approach to energy innovation. Unlike human technologies that often become obsolete within decades, the respiratory systems operating in your body tonight have been continuously successful for billions of years. They have survived every major extinction event, adapted to every significant environmental change, and continued to improve in efficiency and sophistication across vast spans of geological time. You are powered by the most thoroughly tested, most continuously refined, most ultimately successful energy technology ever developed. The beauty of this moment lies in how it demonstrates that you are simultaneously individual and universal, temporary and eternal, simple and impossibly complex. Your individual existence will span only a brief moment in the vast sweep of evolutionary time. Yet the energy systems that sustain you tonight connect you to nearly half of Earth's entire history. Your breathing is uniquely yours, yet it operates through molecular mechanisms shared with every complex organism that has ever lived. You are a temporary arrangement of matter that has become conscious enough to contemplate its own deep history, to feel wonder at the vast story of cooperation and innovation that led to this moment of peaceful rest. As we reach the end of our gentle journey through deep time, let yourself rest in the profound realization that every breath you take tonight is both completely ordinary and absolutely miraculous. Ordinary because billions of organisms breathe every day. Miraculous because your breathing represents the culmination of the most successful energy revolution in the 4 billion-year history of life on Earth, connecting you in this quiet moment to the vast, patient, beautiful story of how life learned to transform sunlight and oxygen into consciousness, awareness, and dreams across the endless expanse of cosmic time. And so, dear fellow traveler through the vast epochs of deep time, we arrive at the peaceful conclusion of our cosmic journey together. We've drifted gently across 5 billion years of the most remarkable energy revolution in the history of life, and discovered that the simple act of breathing connects you to every major breakthrough in the evolution of cellular respiration. From the first fermentation experiments in ancient seas to the sophisticated respiratory networks that sustain your dreams tonight. Along the way, we've seen that learning to breathe is not just the story of individual cellular innovation, but the grand chronicle of cooperation itself, how ancient bacteria learned to work together with their host cells, how photosynthesis and respiration became partners in planetary energy cycles, how mitochondrial inheritance creates unbroken connections across billions of years of maternal lineages, and how your peaceful breathing tonight represents the continuation of Earth's most successful energy partnerships across the vast expanse of geological time. So let me ask you once more, gently as I did at the start, where are you listening from tonight? And as you breathe slowly and peacefully, can you feel the presence of those ancient partnerships still working quietly within every cell of your body, still connecting you to the dawn of complex life itself? If you found any wonder, any peace, or any deeper appreciation for the miracle of breathing in this quiet expedition through deep time, I'd be ever so grateful if you'd like the video, maybe subscribe, and share this gentle exploration of life's greatest energy revolution with someone else who might need to remember that they are powered by 2.5 billion years of cellular wisdom. Your breath tonight carries within it the entire story of how life learned to transform poison into power, how cooperation creates possibilities that no individual can achieve alone, and how the most ordinary aspects of existence, the simple rhythm of breathing in and breathing out, connect you to the most extraordinary story ever told across the cosmic reaches of time and space. Sleep well, fellow descendant of ancient cellular partnerships, wherever and whenever you are, carried gently into dreams by the same energy systems that have been sustaining complex life across the vast, patient, beautiful expanse of deep evolutionary time.